Chapter 339. Go to Canwang. The shop that Xueqi was interested in was a shop on the pedestrian street of Tiannan City. It had 2 floors and was about 300 square meters. It used to be a small electrical appliance market, but because it couldn't keep up with the times, its business was gradually taken away by large shopping malls. Its turnover had been declining year after year, and the boss couldn't stand it anymore, so he was thinking about transferring the shop in his hands and doing other business. Go to Canwang. Li Yundong followed Xueqi to the shop and looked up and down. He whispered to Xueqi, "This shop is good. It's spacious and bright, and it's facing the street, but the rent is probably quite high. I don't know if we can afford it." Xueqi explained with a smile, "I've inquired about it. It's 300,000 yuan a year." Li Yundong was shocked. 300,000 yuan a year? That's a lot of money. Xueqi said, "It's a lot. We rented 2 houses before, which cost more than 100,000 yuan a year. But those are residential houses, and this is a shop facing the street, so it's naturally expensive." Li Yundong thought for a while, then turned to Zi Yuan and asked, "Zi Yuan, what do you think?" Zi Yuan was a little distracted and said blankly, "Ah? What did you say?" Li Yundong felt strange. He had never seen Zi Yuan like this before. He couldn't help but ask, "What's wrong with you? You seem to have something on your mind." Zi Yuan calmed down and smiled slightly. "Nothing. Are you asking about the rent?" Seeing that she was unwilling to tell him, Li Yundong stopped asking. He wanted to find a chance to ask her in private. He said, "Yes, I think the price is a little high. 300,000 yuan a year is a lot of money. Even if we pay it once a year, we will have paid all our money. Let alone the decoration, we will be strapped for money again." Li Yundong continued, "You see, although we have a lot of tea products on hand, we can't just open a tea house with Thai guanyin, can we? We will definitely have to buy more tea, and then we will have to spend money again." As he said this, Li Yundong couldn't help but smile bitterly. "I don't know how expensive it is if I'm not in charge. Only after becoming the leader did I realize that money is really not money. I used to think that all cultivators could abstain from eating and didn't have to spend a penny on food. Now I know that it's all nonsense." Zi Yuan smiled and said, "Dharma, wealth, companions, and earth treasures, you can't cultivate without money. Great cultivators also needed to eat and drink. The theory of cultivation originated from traditional Chinese medicine. It was a scientific and rigorous thing. Even if it was explained by Western scientific theories, some things could still be explained. Watch net. The so-called law of conservation of energy can explain the law of cultivation. People can't create a part of energy out of thin air, they must absorb and borrow the energy around them, or through eating, cultivating and other behaviors to store the excess energy in the body, and only release it when needed." When Xueqi heard Zi Yuan and Li Yundong suddenly talking about cultivation, she pricked up her ears and listened attentively. Hearing this, she suddenly asked, "Is Enidia a lie?" Zi Yuan glanced at her. Seeing that she was smart and eager to learn, she smiled at her approvingly and said, "No, whether in ancient times or modern times, Enidia exists. It's just that it's a little different from what people understand." "What are the differences?" Xueqi asked. Zi Yuan glanced at Li Yundong and said with a smile, "This is your disciple. Why don't you explain?" Li Yundong smiled and said, "Test me? Well, let me explain." Li Yundong said to Xueqi, "Enidia is also called Broken Valley or Jew Valley. As the name implies, you can see from the literal meaning that it actually means that you don't eat the 5 grains. However, most people think that Enidia means not eating anything, just eating wind and drinking dew. Think about it, if all of us cultivators ate wind and drank dew, how much money would we save? Do I need to worry so much?" Xueqi laughed and said, "But in reality?" Li Yundong chuckled and said, "But in fact, this is a big mistake. Enidia is only to get rid of the filthy qi in the body. Because people eat grains, they inevitably have urine and feces, which are extremely dirty. How can they become immortals? But if they don't eat grains, where does human nutrition come from? People have to consume energy to live. Where does this energy come from? Could it be that he really came here to eat wind and drink dew? Isn't that a big joke?" Xueqi became more and more curious. "Then where does the nutrition come from?" Li Yundong smiled and said, Where does it come from? To eat other things. Abstaining from grains is just not eating the 5 grains and miscellaneous grains. Eating other things is not the 5 grains and miscellaneous grains. Xueqi was surprised. No way. Then won't eating other things cause, urinate and defecate? Li Yundong laughed and said, it depends on what you eat. The Book of Northern Qi once recorded a hermit cultivator of Mount Langya. He practiced the art of anedia, but he ate pine nuts, atractylodes macrocephala, poria, and other raw medicines every day. The Book of Old Tang also recorded a person named Wang Yuanji, who was also a cultivator who practiced the art of anedia. What did he eat every day? Ganoderma. He ate Ganoderma as a meal. Of course, he didn't eat grains. Xueqi opened her mouth wide. No way, he ate Ganoderma as a meal? How much would this meal cost? Ziyuan chuckled and said, so, now do you know why wealth ranks second among cultivation, wealth, companionship, and earth tools? In the past, many cultivators in ancient times had poor families and little money. They yearned for cultivation, but they didn't have the money to buy all kinds of medicinal materials necessary for cultivation, so they went up the mountain to dig medicinal materials and cultivate in the mountains. Go to the internet. 7K. O.M. Xueqi sighed and said, no wonder those cultivators lived in the mountains in ancient times, and all of them were proficient in traditional Chinese medicine. It turns out that they wanted to be self-sufficient. But why haven't I heard of these things in modern times? On January 7, 1988, the People's Daily reported on a 25-year-old girl from Yuxingtang Village, Zhangjiapu District, Mocking City, Hubei Province. This girl's name was Xueqi. When she was 15 years old, she had a serious illness. After she escaped from danger, she didn't eat any food for 10 years. When she got out of bed, she moved as usual and smiled freely. At that time it was a strange story. Li Yundong smiled and said, this girl must have met a great cultivator and taken some anedia pill or some miraculous medicine. Ziyuan glanced at Li Yundong and nodded. You guessed right. Back then, Celestial Master Zhang of our Zhengyi school happened to pass by and fed her the immortal anedia pill, which saved her life. Li Yundong asked curiously. Then she didn't cultivate later. Ziyuan shook her head and said, no, a serious illness burned her cauldron. Even if she was saved, it would just be a broken cauldron. Xueqi asked curiously, the immortal anedia pill? Is there such a thing in this world? Ziyuan smiled and said, yes, I still remember the prescription. Xueqi asked curiously, tell me about it. Ziyuan opened her mouth and said, the immortal anedia pill is made of sealwort, jade bamboo, sesame, asparagus, jujube, black bean, Ganoderma lucidum, pine nuts, atractylodes macrocephala, mulberry, walnut, honey, ophiophagon, and other traditional Chinese medicine and ingredients. There are also mineral medicines such as cinnabar, realgar, mica, and other medicinal ingredients. Xueqi was dumbfounded. Oh my, these things are all health food with high nutritional value. That means you don't have to eat grains. How much money would it cost to eat this every day? At this time, Li Yundong laughed and said, you also understand. Ziyuan smiled and said, among the cultivation sects, only a few big sects with strong financial resources can practice anedia cultivation, and only a few leaders and direct disciples can take this kind of immortal anedia pill. Even the leaders of ordinary sects can't afford it, so we in the cultivation world also have a nickname for the immortal anedia pill. Li Yundong and Xueqi asked in unison, what nickname? Ziyuan pursed her lips and said happily, the pill of ruin. After that, the three of them burst out laughing in unison. Su Chan, who was messing around in the shop, heard their laughter and came over curiously. She blinked her eyes and asked, Yundong, what are you talking about? Why are you laughing so happily? Li Yundong chuckled and touched her head. It's nothing. What do you think? Su Chan nodded excitedly. Well, it's very good. We all like it here very much. Li Yundong said to Xueqi. Then let's rent this place. I won't dawdle. Xueqi saw that Li Yundong had been frowning because of the high rent. He had discussed it with her and Ziyuan for a long time and had been hesitant. But now, with a word from Su Chan, he immediately made a decision. It could be seen that Su Chan's position in his heart was very important. Xueqi sighed in her heart. but she didn't show it on her face. She nodded with a smile and took out her mobile phone. I'll call someone from the Bureau of Commerce. After that, she walked to the side to make the call. Li Yundong nodded with a smile. He wondered in his heart, didn't Zhou Qin's relationship with the officials break down because of her father's fall? How can she still contact the Bureau of Commerce? But he quickly thought, a centipede is dead, but not dead. After all, the Zhou family still has some power in Tiannan City. But not long after, Li Yundong saw Zhou Qin walking over with a livid face. Li Yundong's heart skipped a beat and he asked in a deep voice, "What's wrong?" Zhou Qin's face was cold and she didn't speak for a long time. After a while, she gritted her teeth and sneered. Seeing that our Zhou family has fallen, the tea has cooled down. Now he's putting on airs. As she said this, she looked at Li Yundong in confusion. Master, have you offended someone? As soon as I said that you wanted to rent this store, they immediately went back on their word. Li Yundong said in surprise. Me? No. Wait. Li Yundong said thoughtfully, in fact, there are quite a few people I've offended. Lu Chuan in the school is one, and I've offended the 6 great sects in the cultivation world, not to mention the Zhengyi school. In the business world, I've offended Zheng Yuming and Zhao Yuzhen. Zi Yuan said helplessly, remember last time on Mount Tianlong, I told you not to kill too much so that you wouldn't be able to do anything in the future? Do you understand now? There are many villains in this world. You can crush them with one finger in a head-on confrontation, but they are best at stabbing you in the back. You don't even know who is trying to harm you. Li Yundong said with a wry smile, yes, Zhenren Zi Yuan is right. What should we do now? Zhou Qin, is there any room for negotiation? Zhou Qin shook her head and said, if my father was still in his position, nothing would be a problem. But now, Li Yundong didn't want Zhou Qin to carry a psychological burden. Although he was secretly unhappy, he still smiled and comforted her. It's okay. Tang Sanzang will encounter 81 difficulties when he goes to the West to obtain Buddhist scriptures. Our difficulties are nothing. Zhou Qin sighed and said, the shop here is the most ideal. The other shops are not very ideal. Li Yundong smiled and said to Su Chan, go and call your Sherbua and Shiji. Let's go. Seeing that things were not going well, Su Chan answered obediently and said goodbye to the Fox Zen school. Then, the group of people left the shop together. When they arrived at the pedestrian street, Zhou Qin sighed and said, Master, it's all my fault. If I had just... Li Yundong interrupted her and said with a smile, don't say it. It's not your fault. As the saying goes, there will be a way when the car comes to the mountain, and the boat will go straight when it comes to the bridgehead. There must be a way. If it doesn't work, it's okay not to rent this place. Let's go and see if there are any good shops in other places. The others nodded one after another. Just as they were about to leave, they suddenly heard an old voice shouting in surprise and joy. Little Magic Doctor? Li Yundong found the voice familiar, but he didn't take it to heart. Zhou Qin's heart skipped a beat. She turned around and took a closer look. She saw an old lady in a dark blue short coat and a pair of navy blue cloth shoes looking at her with a smile on her face. Zhou Qin recognized that the old lady in front of her was the old lady who had been very close to her when she had been in the hospital. She was surprised and happy and shouted, Old Lady Su! In the afternoon, I will go out to watch a movie. I wish everyone a happy new year. Thank you to everyone who voted for me in the new year. Thank you for your support and encouragement. I cupped my hands and bowed. Chapter 340. Go to watch net. Old Lady Su hadn't dared to confirm it before, so she had just called out tentatively. At this time, when she saw Zhou Qin turn around, she realized that it was indeed them. She knew that Zhou Qin was here, so the boy beside her must be the little magic doctor who had cured her. She smiled and said, Little Zhou, it's really you. Watch net. At this time, Li Yundong turned around and also recognized the old lady in front of him. It was the old woman he had cured in the hospital. He smiled and said, It's you, old lady. Granny Su held Zhou Qin in one hand and Li Yundong in the other. She looked very enthusiastic. Her old face was smiling like a chrysanthemum. Little Magic Doctor. You left in a hurry last time. I wanted to thank you, but I couldn't find you. God has eyes. I finally met you today. You're not allowed to run away. I have to thank you properly. You cured my illness last time. My body is so good now. It's like I'm 10 or 20 years younger. Li Yundong chuckled and said, Grandma, this is what I should do. Old Lady Su said disapprovingly, Hey, what are you talking about? How can there be such a natural thing in the world? Good people must be rewarded. Otherwise, who would be a good person in this world? If they were all bad people, wouldn't the world be in chaos? No, I must thank you properly today. No, have you eaten yet? Let me count the number of people here. Old Lady Su counted them one by one with a smile. She smiled ambiguously at Li Yundong and said, Good heavens, more than a dozen beautiful girls are as beautiful as flowers. Little magic doctor. You are so capable and lucky. Let's go eat together. Li Yundong smiled and said, Grandma, we've already had dinner. We're in a hurry to look at the shop now. Old Lady Su asked curiously, Why are you looking at the storefront? Do you want to open a shop? Xueqi explained with a smile, Mrs. Su, we want to open a boutique tea house. You know, drinking more tea can keep you healthy, get rid of diseases, and prolong your life. Mrs. Su said happily, Well, if your tea house is open, I will come to your tea house every day to drink tea. Not only me, but also my friends. Since it's opened by you, little miracle doctor, we are at ease. Li Yundong was both happy and worried. He was happy that there was already a group of stable customers here before the shop opened. He was worried that where could he find a shop? Seeing the bitter smile on Li Yundong's face, Xueqi smiled and said to Old Lady Su, Old Lady Su, we appreciate your kindness, but this shop may not be open yet. Old Lady Su asked, What's wrong? Is there any problem? Xueqi sighed and said, We took a fancy to this store and made an agreement with Director Wang of the Industry and Commerce Bureau, but in the end, he went back on his word. Watch net. 7K. OM. Old Lady Su opened her mouth wide and said, You're going back on your word? Why? Why did this kid go back on his word? Why didn't he do what he promised? Xueqi shook her head and said, I don't know. When I called him just now, he didn't say anything. Maybe he offended someone. Old Lady Su slapped her thigh and said angrily, This brat, give me the phone. I'll tell him. Xueqi and Li Yundong looked at each other in surprise. Li Yundong asked curiously, Old Lady Su, can you help us with this matter? Old Lady Su laughed and said, This brat is my son. Do you think I can help you? Li Yundong and the others were all overjoyed. Xueqi smiled and dialed the phone. Director Wang said impatiently on the phone, Hey, didn't I say that this matter can't be done? Xueqi didn't wait for him to finish speaking. She smiled and handed the phone to Old Lady Su. Old Lady Su shouted into the phone as if she were holding a walkie-talkie, Wang Dongliang, you little bastard, get over here quickly. Bang. The sound of something falling came from the phone. Wang Dongliang asked in surprise, Mom, why is it you? Old Lady Su said loudly, Brat, I'm waiting for you at number 138 Dongha Road now. If I don't see you for half an hour, don't come back to my house for the rest of this year. After that, she pressed the button to turn off the phone. Old Lady Su raised her head with a smile and said to Li Yundong, Let's wait here for a while. This brat will come later. Let's go to the internet. 7K. OM. Sure enough, after waiting for about 10 minutes, a Honda swaggered into the pedestrian street. A man about 1.8 meters tall, about 30 or 40 years old, got out of the car. He was wearing the uniform of the Bureau of Industry and Commerce and had a strong smell of alcohol on him. It was Wang Dongliang, the director of the Bureau of Industry and Commerce. Wang Dongliang glanced at Li Yundong. When his eyes swept over Su Chan, Zi Yuan, Zhou Qin, and the others beside Li Yundong, he was so shocked that his eyeballs almost popped out of their sockets. He said in surprise, Where is this child from? Why did he bring so many beautiful women out to play? In his opinion, Li Yundong must be the son of an official or a rich man. Especially when he saw Zhou Qin standing beside Li Yundong and faintly looking at him. He was more and more certain of his opinion. In the officialdom, it was common to follow those in power and trample on those who had lost their power. But although Zhou Qin had lost her power, the daughter of the Zhou family had a strong character, which had spread throughout the officialdom of Tiannan City. Almost everyone was in awe of Zhou Qin's fiery character. Although Wang Dongliang was not afraid of Zhou Qin, a beautiful woman who had lost her power, in his opinion, a woman like Zhou Qin would follow a man so obediently. How capable did this man have to be to subdue her? What kind of background did this man have? Wang Dongliang thought quickly and thought to himself, I miscalculated. Zhao Yuzhen, that bastard, actually set me up. I drank too much and agreed to him too quickly. Wang Dongliang kept rolling his eyes, trying to think of a way. He smiled and nodded to Li Yundong, Zhou Qin, and the others, then said to Old Lady Su with an apologetic smile, Mom, why did you call me over in such a hurry? Old Lady Su didn't stand on ceremony. She raised her hand and slapped his scalp. You little brat, don't you know what you've done wrong? Wang Dongliang dodged and said with a bitter face, Mom, we're on the street. Pay attention to your image. Old Lady Su became even angrier. She bent down to take off her shoes and hit him with them. You still care about your image? You little rascal. You've made your mother unable to be a proper person. You've made your mother lose all her face. Wang Dongliang covered his head with one hand and pulled Old Lady Su to the door of the shop. He cried out with a sad face, Mom, what did I do? Tell me clearly. Old Lady Su panted and said, Tell me, did you promise to rent this shop to Zhou Qin? Wang Dongliang's heart skipped a beat and he thought to himself, Sure enough, but how did Zhou Qin know my mother? Wang Dongliang had been in the officialdom for a long time and had long become a wily old fox. He asked slyly and tentatively, Mom, how did you know Zhou Qin? Old Lady Su said angrily, T, your mother met her when she was in the hospital. Wang Dongliang smiled bitterly in his heart. Mom, how could you cause trouble for me when you were in the hospital? I asked you to live in the advanced nursing room, but you refused. Now it's all over. But he absolutely couldn't say this out loud. Wang Dongliang smiled apologetically and said, So you're a fellow patient? Old Lady Su spat, Bah, you jinx. She pulled him over, pointed at him and said, Do you know who this is? Wang Dongliang had long wanted to get information out of him. He straightened up, stretched out his hand with a smile, and said, Hello, I haven't asked for your name yet. Li Yundong smiled calmly and said, I don't dare, Li Yundong. Wang Dongliang thought to himself, It's really him. Old Lady Su said from the side, You little brat, my illness was cured by him. This is the little miracle-working doctor. Wang Dongliang looked at Li Yundong with wide eyes and said, Are you the little miracle-working doctor that my mother always talks about? I've heard so much about you that my ears have become calloused. Seeing you today, it's really not as good as hearing about you. Li Yundong chuckled and said, Old Lady Su, you flatter me. Wang Dongliang saw that Li Yundong was young, but his temperament was really extraordinary, especially when it came to dealing with people. He had the demeanor of a great master. He was secretly surprised, and his face became more and more enthusiastic. Hello. I've always wanted to thank you in person, but I haven't found a chance. I didn't expect that I would rush into the Temple of the Dragon King today. I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. Wang Dongliang saw that Li Yundong was surrounded by beautiful women, and he really didn't look like an ordinary person. He couldn't figure out his background, and his mother was making a fuss, so he could do him a favor. He took advantage of the situation and said, You want to rent this shop, don't you? No problem. I'll go back and approve it. Li Yundong was overjoyed, but he didn't show it on his face. He just smiled faintly and said, That's great, but how many years do you want to rent it? Wang Dongliang said, Generally, there are 2 years of rent, and there are also 3 years of rent. Li Yundong asked, But I have limited funds on hand. Can I rent it once a year? Wang Dongliang looked embarrassed. As soon as he hesitated, Old Lady Su immediately slapped him with the sole of her shoe and shouted, What else are you thinking? What's the difference between renting it once a year and once every 2 years? It doesn't matter who I rent it to, but to the little miracle-working doctor. He can benefit society. I'm still waiting to drink his tea. Wang Dongliang's arm was covered with gray shoe prints, and he looked embarrassed. He smiled bitterly and said, Mom, don't make trouble. We have rules. Seeing that Old Lady Su was about to make trouble again, he quickly said, But rules are dead, and people are alive. Wang Dongliang thought for a moment and said, "It's not impossible to rent it once a year, but you have to pay 300,000 yuan in full." Before he could open his mouth, old lady Su next to him opened her mouth wide and said in surprise, 300,000 yuan? Are you a robber or a hooligan? Last year it was 200,000 yuan, and this year it has risen to 300,000 yuan? No, 200,000 yuan. Don't you know that the country is now suppressing housing prices? You're blatantly going against the country. Wang Dongliang didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Mom, these are two different things. Can you stop making a fuss? I'm begging you. Our Bureau of Industry and Commerce has a task target every year. Old lady Su said angrily, "What bullshit task target? Who are you fooling? Do you think I don't know your tricks? Doesn't the extra money go into your pockets?" No, I don't care about others, but the little miracle working doctor wants to rent this shop, so I must take care of it. The little miracle working doctor has done me a favor, so I have to repay him. 200,000 yuan for a year rent. Do as you see fit. Anyway, I'm telling you today. If you don't agree, don't call me mother in the future. I don't have an ungrateful son like you. Chapter 341. Go to Watch Network. Wang Dongliang was completely speechless. He looked around with sweat all over his face, then pulled Li Yundong aside and said with a wry smile, "Brother, as you can see, I have no choice but to agree today. Go to Kanban. 7K. Oath M. Do me a favor, I can rent this shop front to you, but you can't tell anyone else. Otherwise, I'll be out of luck, and your shop front will be gone too." Li Yundong laughed and said, "Director Wang, that's for sure. In the future, when my tea house opens, you can come more often. I see that you don't look well, so I guess there's something wrong with your liver. It's good for your liver to drink more tea here." Wang Dongliang didn't take it seriously at all. He just wanted to leave as soon as possible so that his mother wouldn't slap him with the soles of her shoes again. He waved his hand and said, "Let's talk about it when I have time. You can go to the Bureau of Industry and Commerce later. I'll ask someone to help you get things done. I still have something to do, so I'll leave first." Li Yundong didn't ask him to stay and said with a smile, "Okay, see you later." Wang Dongliang turned to old lady Su with a flattering smile and said, "Mom, are you satisfied now?" Old lady Su's anger turned to joy and she said, "That's more like it. Go and do your thing. There's nothing for you to do here." Wang Dongliang was depressed. "Oh, she really comes and goes at my beck and call." Gloomily, he got into the car, started the car, and drove away. Li Yundong and the others looked at each other and then cheered in unison. The little foxes even high-fived each other to celebrate. Su Chan smiled and held Li Yundong's arm. She sighed and said, "Yundong, we finally have our own territory." Li Yundong laughed and scolded, "You make it sound like we're a group of gangsters." Old lady Su looked at Su Chan curiously and muttered in her heart, "Who is this young magic doctor's girlfriend, Xiao Zhou or this girl in front of me?" She muttered in a low voice, "If gangsters can get so many beautiful women, then the welfare of the underworld is too good." Although old lady Su's voice was low, Li Yundong and the others could hear it clearly. They all laughed out loud. The matter of renting a house had taken a turn for the better. Li Yundong smiled at old lady Su and said, "Grandma, if it weren't for you today, I would have to run a lot. Watch net." Old lady Su waved her hand with a smile and said, No. I just happened to meet you at the right time. If it weren't for your excellent medical skills and medical ethics, I wouldn't have helped you, right? At the end of the day, you are a good person. In this world, good people will be rewarded." Li Yundong laughed and said, "Yes, you're right, Grandma. Why don't we find a place to eat? I want to thank you properly." Old lady Su had warmly invited Li Yundong and the others before, but now she smiled and declined. "Forget it. I thought you came out to have fun, so I invited you. But it turns out that you came out to take care of the shop. Now you have to hurry to sign the contract, and then you have to work on the design, decoration, and many other things. Haha, this old woman will not disturb you anymore." Xueqi also smiled and said, "Old lady Su, you are our great hero. If we don't thank you properly, we will feel uneasy." Old lady Su laughed and said, "It doesn't matter. Aren't you going to open a tea house in the future? I'll just come and sit." When the time comes, make some good tea for me. Ah, by the way, I like to drink Thai guanine. Well, Bilyuakan is also good. Li Yundong laughed and said, Grandma, I don't have any other tea here, but I have a lot of Thai guanine. Old Lady Su smiled and said, That's great. I'll come here often. Don't think I'm annoying. Li Yundong laughed and said, Of course not. I'm looking forward to having a distinguished guest like you. Old Lady Su looked Li Yundong up and down, then nodded and praised, Little Magic Doctor, you are really good. You are young, skilled, and handsome. You are really a talent. If I had a daughter, she would definitely marry you. Her words made the others cover their mouths and snicker. Guan Hongling even taunted, Grandma, don't you see that this guy is destined to be in love? You don't have to join in. Old Lady Su laughed, waved her hand, and turned to leave. I'm leaving. I'll come to see you another day. Li Yundong watched Old Lady Su leave with a smile, then sighed to Zi Yuan and the others. Now I believe that there really is karma in this world. Let's go to the internet. 7K. O.M. He looked at Zhou Qin and said, If I hadn't seen you in the hospital, I wouldn't have treated Old Lady Su. Now she wouldn't have returned the favor and helped us. Zhou Qin also said with emotion, Yes, if you hadn't killed young Master He with heavenly thunder, I wouldn't have been lying in the hospital. Li Yundong sighed, then turned to Su Chan and said, If I hadn't met you, so many things wouldn't have happened. As he said this, Li Yundong gently stroked the little girl's soft black hair. God wanted me to meet you. The two of them looked at each other, and Su Chan smiled sweetly. Her eyes curved into crescent moons, which was extremely beautiful. After solving the problem of the shop, Li Yundong and the others went straight to the Bureau of Industry and Commerce. The person in charge of the Bureau of Industry and Commerce had obviously received the news. As the saying goes, it is easy to get things done with someone in the court. In less than 10 minutes, everything was settled. After finishing the formalities and paying the money, Li Yundong said, Today's harvest is not small. We should go back now, and then move to the new house tomorrow. Zi Yuan nodded and said, Well, I believe everyone is tired today. Go back and have a good rest. After returning home and having dinner, the little foxes were more excited than the other after a day outside. They were chattering and making a lot of noise in the living room. Seeing that they were making too much noise, Xueqi scolded them. B*****, do you really think you came down the mountain to play? Don't you need to do cultivation? Go meditate and practice qi for me. The little foxes were frightened by her and immediately sat down on the carpet in the living room to meditate and practice qi. As soon as they quietened down, the whole house became much quieter. Li Yundong was cleaning up the dining table when he saw Su Chan also meditating and practicing qi behind him. He curiously stepped forward and patted her on the shoulder, motioning for her to come to one side. Then he asked softly, Why are you also practicing qi? Su Chan blinked her eyes and said, Of course, I'm also a cultivator. My Shiji and Shimi are all practicing qi, so of course I have to follow them. Li Yundong chuckled and tapped her small pointed nose. You still know that you are a cultivator? I saw you making so much noise these days, so I thought you had forgotten about it. Su Chan said with a smile, In the past, I couldn't calm down. I didn't even solve the problem of living and eating every day, so naturally I couldn't calm down and cultivate. Now it's all right. We don't have to squeeze together like now, and we've found a suitable shop. When the time comes, we can solve our own livelihood problems and cultivate in peace. If I don't cultivate faster, I won't have any hope of catching up with you for the rest of my life. Li Yundong also chuckled. Yes, my cultivation has also been delayed these days. Speaking of this, he suddenly saw Zhou Qin, who was busy washing dishes in the kitchen. Li Yundong's heart skipped a beat. He smiled gently at Su Chan and said, Go and practice qi. I won't disturb you. Su Chan noticed Li Yundong's gaze. She rolled her eyes and asked tentatively, Yundong, are you going to teach Zhou Qin cultivation? Li Yundong nodded and sighed. Yes, she has done so much for me. It's time for me to repay her. I'm going to start teaching her cultivation. Su Chan nodded and said, Indeed. Then you have to teach her well. Li Yundong smiled and said, She is my eldest disciple. Of course I will teach her everything I know. Do I need you to tell me that? Su Chan was a little jealous. She took Li Yundong's hand and whispered, No, you can't just teach her. You have to teach me too. Li Yundong held her in his arms and chuckled. He said in a low voice, "Didn't I teach you?" Su Chan blinked in confusion. "Since when did you teach me that?" she asked. Li Yundong smiled and said, "Didn't I teach you the 5 dragons embracing pillar last time?" Su Chan said angrily, "That doesn't count. I want you to teach me the heavenly Jindan technique." Li Yundong pinched the tip of the little girl's nose and said with a chuckle, "Silly, the heavenly Jindan technique is a very unique cultivation method. It is extremely powerful. Only when your cultivation is high will it be useful to practice it. If you practice it without a high cultivation, not only will you not be able to cultivate to a higher realm, but you will also be held back by the heavenly Jindan technique and shackle your cultivation." Su Chan asked curiously, "Why is that?" Li Yundong smiled and pointed at the gallbladder on the little girl's abdomen with his finger. The heavenly Jindan technique cultivates the qi of the 5 viscera and 6 bowels of the human body by cultivating the qi of the 5 viscera and 6 bowels. If your original courage is not strong, then your cultivation is extremely limited. This is like lifting a barbell. If you only have the strength of 80 kilograms, you can naturally only do 80 kilograms of work. If you force yourself to do it, you will hurt your meridians, muscles, and bones. Su Chan suddenly understood. "I see. You mean that I can only cultivate if I have enough strength?" Li Yundong nodded and said with a smile, "You are worth teaching. Sharpening the axe will not delay the work of cutting firewood." Last time, Lin Yojing's cultivation was not enough, so he forced himself to practice the heavenly Jindan technique. As a result, he woke up very early and couldn't continue cultivating. In the end, he had evil thoughts and greed, and in the end he hurt himself. Su Chan made a face and said, "This guy is so bad. He deserves it." Li Yundong chuckled and patted the little girl's head. "You go and practice qi first. I'll go talk to Xueqi." Su Chan nodded obediently, then found a place in the living room with her Xueqi, sat cross-legged, and began to meditate and practice qi. Seeing that she was meditating, Li Yundong smiled and called Xueqi to the room alone. Ever since she had acknowledged Li Yundong as her master, she had never been alone with him. When she saw that he had called her into the room, it was obvious that he had something private to talk about. She couldn't help but feel a little nervous. She asked, "Master, what's the matter?" Li Yundong nodded and said to Xueqi, "Go and close the door." Xueqi turned around and closed the door, then stood respectfully to the side. Seeing that she was so reserved, Li Yundong smiled and said, "Don't be so nervous. Although we are friends and now master and disciple, there is no need to be so nervous." He pulled over a chair and said, "Sit down. I have something to tell you." Xueqi became more and more nervous. She sat down carefully, her feet only touching half of the chair. Her eyes were fixed on Li Yundong, and her fists were unconsciously clenched. Li Yundong smiled and said, "Ever since you took me as your master, I have been busy and had no time to teach you. Now that I've finally gotten a clue about everything, I can finally free up my hands to teach you how to cultivate. Today, I called you in for no other reason than to establish a real master-disciple relationship with you. Secondly, I want to pass on 3 powerful magical weapons to you." Chapter 342. Go to the web. When Xueqi heard this, all kinds of feelings welled up in her heart. She had wanted to take Li Yundong as her master before, mainly because she wanted to stay by his side. Even if she could only look at him one more time and listen to him one more time, it would be good enough. To watch the net. But the longer she followed Li Yundong, the more she was shocked by his unfathomable Shintong power, and the more she became interested in and yearned for the world of cultivation. Xueqi was born in an official family, so her worship of power was deeply rooted in her heart. It was precisely because of the superhuman strength that Li Yundong had shown that she had been curious and concerned about him. Then, she had fallen in love with this mysterious boy. Even in her subconscious world, there was a faint thought that she didn't know. Maybe one day I can cultivate earth-shattering Shentong, and then Li Yundong will look at me more highly. Su Chan felt that Xueqi could help Li Yundong take care of business and things. Zi Yuan could help Li Yundong cultivate, but she didn't know anything. She was worried and sad, but Xueqi also had her own worries. In Xueqi's opinion, Su Chan was Li Yundong's favorite, and no one could take away his favor. Even if Su Chan didn't know anything, Li Yundong would not have any complaints and would still dote on her as before. As for Zi Yuan, she was both Li Yundong's teacher and friend. She was almost omnipotent. Zi Yuan could help Li Yundong with anything. Such a beautiful, perfect, and powerful woman was simply the public enemy of women. What about himself? Zhou Qin felt that she was the real burden. She didn't know how to cultivate at all. Once the fight started, not only would she not be able to help, but she could only watch from the side. Therefore, she had subconsciously made up her mind to become a great cultivator so that she could help Li Yundong with his worries and difficulties. Now that she could finally cultivate, how could she not be excited? He looked at her and said with emotion, "Aren't you curious about what kind of powerful magical weapons I'll give you?" Zhou Qin took a deep breath and suppressed her emotions. She said respectfully, "Master has taught me powerful magical weapons. This is my good fortune and blessing. No matter what Master teaches me, I will accept it with both hands. How dare I ask what it is?" Li Yundong saw that she was becoming more and more cautious, and his persuasion was useless. He sighed in his heart and didn't say anything more. He took a package from his side, opened it, and took out a wrapped soft whip. Then, he handed it over with both hands. When I first reached the Zhuji phase, I met Lu Fengping and Wu Hao, who tried to snatch my fan of 7 treasures. In the end they were killed by me. I obtained the 5 young blood pearl from Wu Hao and refined it into the fan of 7 treasures. Now, I'll give you LV Fengping's whip. First of all, this is a magic tool for women. When you haven't completed your cultivation, you can use this whip to defend yourself. Second of all, the owner of this whip was originally lustful. For this magic tool to fall into her hands could be said to be a bright pearl cast into the darkness. And you are a person who is unyielding and would rather break than bend. You can use your own righteous qi to suppress the evil qi of this magical item. I hope that this magical item will fall into your hands and one day it can be carried forward, so that it will not be covered in dust. Pickbook Needham. Zhou Qin's face was solemn. She stood up from her seat and knelt down respectfully. She raised her hands high and took the soft whip. Li Yundong didn't stop her. With a solemn expression, he handed the soft whip to her. As soon as Zhou Qin received the soft whip, she felt that it was quite heavy. The handle of the whip was made of swaying granular shark skin, which was very soft to the touch. The body of the whip was as red as flames, and the flames were densely covered with golden threads. It was as if the soft whip would burn in the next second. Zhou Qin's heart trembled. She knew that this soft whip must be an extremely precious magical item just by looking at its appearance. She was hesitating whether to accept it or not when she saw Li Yundong take out another saw-toothed Vajra wheel from his bag. Li Yundong gently held the 2 sides of the saw-toothed Vajra wheel with his 2 fingers and said, "This is the powerful magical item of Yi Yu of the Fox Zen School when she was alive. Yi Yu once relied on this powerful magical item to resist the siege of all the major sects, and did not fall into a disadvantage at all. Later, Chao Yi, the 6th Sherpa of the Fox Zen School, passed this powerful magical item to me and asked me to pass it on as a good disciple. Later, I thought about it and felt that this saw-toothed Vajra wheel was unruly and unusually cold. You are also noble and aloof, so it is a perfect match for you." As he spoke, he handed the saw-toothed Vajra wheel to Zhou Qin and said, "This powerful magical item is extremely powerful, and it has killed countless people. It is a sharp weapon to defend the Tao. You must use it carefully. Be careful that the powerful magical item is too strong and its killing intent will control you instead. Remember." Zhou Qin took the saw-toothed Vajra wheel. The shape of the Vajra wheel was unique, and the workmanship was even better. The engraved picture of the flying Bodhisattva was beautiful, and the Vajra Arhat was vivid and lifelike, as if it would jump out at any time. What was even more amazing was that as soon as Zhou Qin touched the Vajra wheel, she felt a faint fluorescence flowing on the surface of the Vajra wheel. It was like a dream. Zhou Qin faintly felt that this powerful magical item was more precious than the previous one. She looked up with a stern expression and said, "Master, I can't accept these 2 powerful magical items." Li Yundong remained calm and asked, "Why not?" Zhou Qin said, "Although I don't know how to cultivate now, I know that this must be an extremely precious magical item. I don't have the strength to truss a chicken now. Master, you have passed such a precious treasure to me. This is like a child walking in the downtown area with a golden bowl in his hand. How can it not arouse the greed and covetousness of other cultivators? Li Yundong's face was full of admiration. He praised, "I used to know that you were a smart woman. Now it seems that you are much more clear-headed and intelligent than I thought. Yes, you can see through this, which means that your heart is as calm as usual and you don't have any wild thoughts. But don't think too much about it. If someone dares to rob you of your powerful magical item, I will not stand by and watch." Xueqi's heart warmed when she heard this, but she still shook her head and said, "No, although I don't have any cultivation skills now, since I am your disciple, how can I hide under your wings for the rest of my life? What kind of future can such a cultivator have? When the time comes, won't I lose face for you?" Li Yundong chuckled and no longer forced her. He took back the two powerful magical items with both hands and said, "Then I'll keep them for you for the time being. When you reach the Xueqi phase, I'll pass them on to you." East Needham. Xueqi nodded in agreement. Li Yundong then took out the third item, but this time it was a hardcover book. Li Yundong looked at the book, but his expression was far more solemn than the previous two powerful magical items. He said, "Do you know what kind of book this is?" Xueqi said respectfully, "Please tell me, master." Li Yundong said, "When Su Chan left me, Zi Yuan began to teach me about cultivation. She saw that I was ignorant about cultivation and didn't know much about it, so she recommended a classic book in the cultivation world. It was only after reading this cultivation book that I understood the truth of cultivation and officially began to cultivate. Now, I will pass this book to you. I hope you can understand something from it." Xueqi took the book curiously and solemnly. She glanced at it and saw that there were 4 big gilded words on the book. Inner Canon of the Yellow Emperor. She turned to the first page and saw the stamp of Xinhua bookstore on it. Xueqi asked doubtfully, "Master, you said that the Inner Canon of the Yellow Emperor is a classic work in the cultivation world. I can understand that. But isn't this a book that can be bought in Xinhua bookstore? Is this also a powerful magical item?" Li Yundong nodded and said with a smile, "Yes, this is an ordinary book, but in my opinion, it is more important than any other powerful magical item in the world, even though it is sold in every Xinhua bookstore." Li Yundong said with emotion, "When I didn't cultivate before, when I heard about the Inner Canon of the Yellow Emperor, I felt that it was unfathomable. Not to mention wanting to take a look at it, just hearing the name gave me a headache. But after I read it, I realized that our Chinese culture is extensive and profound. It is really unique in the world. No country or race in the world can compare with us. But such a glorious national culture of our country has been passed down to this day, and it has almost been cut off. How many of our 1.4 billion compatriots in the world can know the true meaning of the Inner Canon of the Yellow Emperor?" Hearing this, Xueqi's heart skipped a beat. She asked tentatively, "Master, you mean?" Li Yundong waved his hand and said, "I don't mean anything. I'm just lamenting. The magnificent Chinese culture, which has a history of 5,000 years of cultivation, is now considered to be a heretical practice and feudal superstition. The classic work, the Inner Canon of the Yellow Emperor, has been shelved. The Shurangama Sutra, the Huayan Sutra, the records of Zongjinglu, and the Bio-Puzi, these classic scriptures and cultivation works are covered with dust and no one is interested in them. As a cultivator, how can I not feel emotional in my heart? Sometimes I even think that the world of cultivation may end in our hands one day. If the world of cultivation, which has been passed down for 5,000 years, is broken in our hands, I really don't know what our ancestors would think." Xueqi rarely had a heart-to-heart talk with Li Yundong. She listened attentively, and when she heard this, she couldn't help sighing in her heart. Li Yundong is no different from ordinary boys when he talks and laughs with others, but only at this time does he reveal his true ambition and mind. This is a man who has the world in his mind. For the first time, Xueqi saw Li Yundong faintly show the true temperament of a grand master. Her eyes were full of admiration and love as she said, "Master, have you ever thought of starting your own sect?" Li Yundong was stunned. "Start a sect? Haha, I haven't thought about that. I've only been cultivating for more than half a year now. How can I be worthy of the word sect? How can I set up a sect?" However, Xueqi said, "I don't think so, because there is no age in learning. The one who reaches the top is the first, and the one who is capable is the teacher. Whether a person is a great master or whether he can start a sect has nothing to do with his age. The most important thing is his knowledge and bearing, as well as his breadth of mind and ability. I think that among the young people in the world, only Zi Yuan can be compared to you. However, Zi Yuan's cultivation is limited to herself, while you, master, are thinking about the 5,000 years of Chinese culture in your heart. Your mind and bearing have far surpassed that of your peers. Why can't you start a sect? Even if you can't do it now, you can do it in the future. Li Yundong laughed and said, You just said that I am indeed outstanding among the young people, but I am still too young after all. My knowledge is still not enough, and my ability is even more limited. Besides, since I am now the leader of the Fox Zen school, how can I abandon them and start a sect by myself? Seeing that Zhou Qin was about to speak, Li Yundong waved his hand and said, Well, I know what you mean. The reason why I passed on this Yellow Emperor's internal canon to you is that I hope you will treat it seriously. Although it doesn't have any shentong and is not a powerful magical weapon, if you understand it, it will be much more useful than all the powerful magical weapons in the world. Even if the world of cultivation is cut off one day, as long as this Yellow Emperor's internal canon is still there, the root of the cultivation world will be there, and it will be possible for the cultivation world to come back from the dead. Zhou Qin held the Yellow Emperor's internal canon above her head and bowed deeply. After she got up, she said, Master, the world of cultivation will never be cut off in our hands. As long as you and I are here, the world of cultivation will not be cut off. Even if I am the only one left in the world of cultivation in the future, I will carry forward the way of cultivation. Li Yundong laughed and said, You don't have to exaggerate. Get up. This Yellow Emperor's internal canon has my detailed annotations. You can read it carefully. If there is anything you don't understand, you can ask me. When you finish reading this book, I will officially teach you the first lesson of cultivation. The two of them talked for a long time in the secret room. It was not until 2 or 3 hours later that Li Yundong came out of the room. As soon as he came out, he saw Su Chan and the others in the living room gathered together, as if they were looking at something. Su Chan heard the movement in the room and turned around. When she saw Li Yundong, she immediately waved her hand and said, Yundong, come and see. It's terrible. Something big has happened. The weather is too cold. I'm sick. I have a low fever. Participate in the activity and receive K coins for free previous chapter table of contents next chapter. Chapter 343. Go to Watch Network. Hearing Su Chan's shout, Li Yundong's heart skipped a beat. He walked over calmly and asked, What happened? Look at you, you're so scared. Go to the internet. 7K. Oath M. 16B. Li Yundong walked closer and saw that Zi Yuan and Ruan Hongling were also there. They were all around a laptop, pointing at it. Zi Yuan nodded to Li Yundong and said, You're here? Come and have a look. Li Yundong took a closer look and saw that there was a video on the computer page. At first, the video was still very shaky, but soon Li Yundong found something wrong. He found that there were many trees with talismans and prayer bags hanging in the video. Li Yundong was shocked. Isn't this Shi Yuan Temple? Su Chan tugged at his arm and pointed at a figure in the video. Yes. Who is this? It would have been better if Li Yundong hadn't seen it. As soon as he saw it, he gasped and said in surprise, Isn't this me? Ruan Hongling sneered and said, The best is yet to come. As she said this, Li Yundong and a middle-aged monk began to fight in the video. The two of them were like a blockbuster with computer special effects. The Mahamudra and the Vajra Dharma only made the sky dim and the earth dazzle. In the end, Li Yundong threw out the chakram and rushed past the middle-aged monk. Finally, the video shook, as if someone was fleeing in panic. Li Yundong was shocked and angry. Who filmed this? Why did they post it on the internet? Su Chan blinked her eyes and said, Yundong, now all the people on earth know that you are a cultivator. Li Yundong's face was sullen and he didn't speak. Zi Yuan sighed and said, Fortunately, this video hasn't been posted for a long time. Many people just treat it as a piece of computer special effects. Look at the comments below. Ruan Hongling also dragged the video down to let Li Yundong see the comments below. There were all kinds of comments. What is this? Which movie's special effects? Not bad. When will it be released? Come on, the camera is too shaky, isn't it? What is the director doing? Hey, where is this place? Why does it look so familiar? Shi Yuan Temple. This is Shi Yuan Temple in Dongwu City. I went there last time. Ha ha ha. Don't talk nonsense if you don't understand. This is clearly a real video of me having sex. I almost lost my life when I was having sex. The uploader has appeared? King real video? Is it a movie from CCTV? It doesn't look like it. The scene feels very realistic. Sai, let me tell you the truth. This is just a CG special effect made by a student of Beijing Film Academy. When it's released, it's to pass off the fake as the real thing. It's just sensationalism. You know what I mean. Li Yundong didn't know whether to laugh or cry when he saw this. He smiled bitterly and said, "Fortunately, they all regarded this video as a computer special effect. Otherwise I would have become famous." Su Chan giggled and said, "It's okay. You can only see your back. You won't be famous." On the other hand, Master Feikong has become famous. He was actually found out by a human search. Li Yundong smiled bitterly and said, "What a sin. If Master Feikong finds out, he will probably scold me." Zhou Qin had come out with Li Yundong before. After understanding the situation, she suddenly asked, "Look at you, it seems that you are very afraid that the truth of this video will be known. Why can't cultivation be spread to outsiders?" Zi Yuan explained, "The cultivation world has always been a secret world. Every cultivator is trying their best to maintain the secrets of the cultivation world. This can be said to be an unspoken rule that everyone abides by." Why is this so? Because every cultivator has a strong destructive power, they are a special group of people, and this group of people is related to religion. Our country's government now advocates atheism, and the management of religious beliefs is more strict, and it is the same for cultivators. However, because most cultivators and cultivation sects are arrogant and unruly, the country is also afraid that a high-pressure policy will cause a large number of cultivation sects to leave and be used by hostile forces. Therefore, it has adopted a laissez-faire attitude, but it absolutely does not allow cultivators to swagger through the market. Zhou Qin let out an ah and suddenly said, "I understand. So that's how it is." Zi Yuan nodded and said, "Why is the cultivation world so weak now?" During the Han Dynasty, Emperors Wen and Jing and Empress Dowager Dou believed in Lao Zhuang, so Taoism began to appear and flourish. During the Tang Dynasty, the emperor believed in Buddhism, so Buddhism flourished. During the Song Dynasty, the emperor believed in Taoism, and Emperor Zhenzong of Song summoned the 24th Celestial Master of Mount Longhu and gave him the title of Sir. Especially during the period of Emperor Huizong of Song, the 30th Celestial Master, Zhang Jixian, won the favor of Emperor Huizong of Song and built a Taoist temple in the capital for him. The Shangqing Temple of Mount Longhu was also upgraded to the Shangqing Zhengyi Palace. During the Yuan Dynasty, Genghis Khan and Kublai both believed in Taoism, especially Xueqi, who believed in the Chuanzhen Dragon sect. In 1227 AD, Genghis Khan gave Xueqi the Golden Tiger token and commanded the Taoists in the world. Therefore, Xueqi's Chuanzhen Dragon sect flourished and became a major Taoist sect comparable to our Zhengyi school. Speaking of this, Zi Yuan turned to Li Yundong and said, "Du Fei, who fought with you last time, is the eldest Shixiang of the Chuanzhen Dragon sect. He is the direct descendant of Xueqi. The Chuanzhen Dragon sect is also the leader of the 6 sects, and its words carry a lot of weight. If Du Fei hadn't led the Chuanzhen Dragon sect to leave last time, I'm afraid that the matter of Mount Tianlong would not have been so easy to resolve." Li Yundong nodded and said, "You're right. Du Fei is an upright man." Zi Yuan nodded and continued, "In the Ming Dynasty, the emperor began to believe in our Zhengyi school again. Zhu Yuanzhang granted the title of Great Zhenren to the 42nd Taoist master and ordered the Zhengyi school to rule the world. From then on, until the 52nd generation, except for Zhang Guoxiang, the 50th Taoist master, all the others were Great Zhenren." When Zhou Qin heard this, she nodded and sighed. Imperial power is above everything. It has been the case since ancient times. But why hasn't the cultivation world become like this now? Zi Yuan smiled slightly and said, "In the Qing dynasty, the Manchus entered the pass. The emperor of the Qing dynasty believed in Tibetan Buddhism. Buddhism and Taoism were originally incompatible. In any era, Buddhism would inevitably suppress Taoism, and Taoism would inevitably suppress Buddhism. As soon as the emperor of the Qing dynasty believed in Tibetan Buddhism, our Taoists began to be suppressed one after another, and even the Buddhism of the Central Plains was affected. Until the Republic of China, Taoism was about to flourish. The 62nd generation Taoist master Zhang Shaochu, organized the National Church Organization of Xueqi School in Shanghai, which was the Taoist Association of the Republic of China. However, it's a pity. Li Yundong rarely heard Zi Yuan talk about the history of the rise and fall of the cultivation world. He listened with great interest and asked, "What's a pity?" Zi Yuan sighed softly and said, "It's a pity that in 1919, the May 4th movement broke out. This movement completely destroyed all the things that the cultivation world relied on for survival. Western culture invaded on a large scale, and traditional culture was abandoned like a pair of worn-out shoes. The prosperity of Taoism was based on the prosperity of Taoist culture, and so was the prosperity of Buddhism. However, the traditional culture of both Buddhism and Taoism was destroyed, and they lost the soil on which they relied for survival. How could they prosper? Therefore, Taoist master Zhang Xiaochu's Taoist Association of the Republic of China only established a branch in Shanghai before it died." Zhou Qin suddenly understood. She looked at Li Yundong and understood more and more why Li Yundong had felt that way before. Li Yundong glanced at her, smiled slightly, and said, "Zi Yuan, go on." Zi Yuan nodded and said, "You all know what happened after that. In the war between the Kuomintang and the Communist Party, the Atheist Party won, and the cultivation world ushered in the darkest period. Then the Great Leap Forward, and the 10 years of turmoil, these successive movements caused the cultivation world, which had already been greatly damaged, to almost disappear from Jianghu. A large number of cultivators went abroad and set up branches of various sects abroad. This situation did not improve until the reform and opening up, and the country's control over cultivators became much more relaxed. Especially in the past 2 years, cultivators began to slowly walk in Jianghu again. Especially Wan Zhenyuan, the leader of the Gazao sect. When he saw that the country had begun to relax its control over the cultivation world, he began to refine the 3 elixirs again in order to become an immortal. It took him 2 years to finally refine the Renyuan Jindan, and then you and Su Chan met. Li Yundong and Su Chan looked at each other and laughed. Li Yundong said, "It was a coincidence. Everything has its own destiny." Zi Yuan said, "I've said so much just to tell you that you can't do whatever you want just because the country has relaxed its control over cultivators, especially you, Li Yundong. You are now a famous figure in the cultivation world. You have to pay attention to your words and actions. Don't be arrogant, let alone high profile. Otherwise, if you attract the attention of the country, it will definitely be a disaster. With your cultivation, you can run away. But what about your disciples and the disciples of the Fox Zen school? Where are they going?" Li Yundong listened with a solemn expression. "Thank you for your advice. I'll remember it." Zi Yuan continued, "However, this video is not enough for the country to keep an eye on you from now on, because the country has adopted an autonomous approach to the management of the cultivation world. Even if cultivators manage the cultivation world themselves, they can never publicize it, let alone make it public. Therefore, if this video is exposed, there will definitely be people in the cultivation world who are dissatisfied with you, especially since you are now the leader of the Fox Zen school. This is something that will be criticized. Now, if others use this matter to make things difficult for you, you will be very passive." Li Yundong had been listening with a serious face, but at this time, he relaxed. He chuckled and said, "Since it's a matter of the cultivation world and it's managed by cultivators themselves, I have nothing to be afraid of. These people want to make things difficult for me, but in the end, it's nothing more than a fight. When it comes to fighting, I'm not afraid of them. At worst, I'll just deal with them when they come." Hearing Li Yundong's heroic words, Zi Yuan advised him, "Don't be careless. Last time, the cultivation world was full of experts of the younger generation. None of the seniors of the major sects came. Moreover, I don't know how many cultivation sects are hidden in the divine land. Although the May 4th movement, the abolition of the Four Olds, and the 10 years of turmoil have destroyed the soil and foundation on which they rely for survival, these cultivators have hidden themselves very well. Now that the country is showing signs of thawing in early spring, they will definitely come out. Now that you are known as the #1 expert of the younger generation in the cultivation world, there must be many cultivators who are eager to try and defeat you. As long as they defeat you, they will immediately become famous." Li Yundong's heart trembled. He nodded to Zi Yuan and said, "You're right. I remember last time, a person from the Blue Cave sect in Sichuan attacked me. If my cultivation hadn't been higher than his, I would have most likely fallen into his ambush. I'll pay attention in the future. Li Yundong turned to Xueqi, Xueqi, and the others of the Fox Zen school and said, "Try not to go out in the future. If you do, pay more attention and go in groups." Xueqi and the others answered in unison, "Yes, leader." Li Yundong nodded with a smile. He was about to speak again when he suddenly heard a knock at the door. Li Yundong was stunned and asked, "Who is it?" The person at the door shouted, "Express delivery." Li Yundong asked curiously, "There's someone delivering express delivery so late at night? Are you kidding me? Did someone buy something?" He looked at Xueqi, who shook her head like a rattle. Xueqi also shook her head and said, "I didn't either." Zi Yuan and Ruan Hongling also said, "It wasn't us." Chao Yi, Lu Yuehong, and Zhuang Yiting looked at each other and shook their heads. The little foxes simply asked, "What is express delivery?" Li Yundong smiled and said, "That's strange. Could it be that it was delivered by mistake? I'll go and have a look." He walked to the door and opened it. He saw a man about the same height as him standing at the door. The man was wearing a motorcycle helmet and sunglasses that covered almost half of his face. The man was holding a parcel in his hand. He looked at Li Yundong and asked, "Are you Li Yundong?" Li Yundong nodded and said, "I am." The man handed over the bag and a pen, saying, "Your express delivery." Li Yundong did not doubt him. He took the pen and lowered his head to sign the bill. But as soon as he lowered his head, the man in front of him fiercely stabbed the Bai Hui acupoint on the top of Li Yundong's head like a spear. Thank you for your concern. When I woke up, there were a lot of greetings and votes. I feel very warm. Thank you all. Last week, the top flowers list ranked 8th. This week, there will be 3 updates. It's still the same old rule, 246 days. Chapter 344. Go to watch net. This sneak attack immediately caused Xueqi and the others to cry out in alarm. One by one they shouted, "Shameless!" Zi Yuan was so angry that she shouted, "Stop!" But even though they shouted quickly, Li Yundong's reaction was even faster. He only felt a strong wind coming from above his head, and the pores near his Bai Hui acupoint suddenly exploded. He immediately thought to himself that it was not good. He held the ballpoint pen in his hand and stabbed it at the man's chest like lightning without thinking. Go to watch net. 7K. Oath M. 16B. Li Yundong could feel that the man's blow was like a thunderbolt. Not only was it extremely powerful, but it could even pierce a hole in granite, let alone his skull. If he returned with all his strength, he might not be able to block the man's long-planned move. Therefore, he simply let the man hit the top of his skull, and he also hit the man's huagai acupoint. All the zhenqi in Li Yundong's body was poured into this ballpoint pen. At this critical moment of life and death, even a diamond would be pierced, let alone a human's chest. The huagai acupoint was an important acupoint of the human body. If this man's huagai acupoint was pierced by Li Yundong, all the qi in his body would dissipate on the spot and he would die. Li Yundong bet that the man would not dare to exchange his life with his own. Moreover, there was a ballpoint pen in Li Yundong's hand, which was longer than the man's finger. Although he had taken action later, it had arrived first. As the saying goes, an inch longer, an inch stronger. The man had never expected that the pen he had given to Li Yundong would ruin his plan in the end. His heart was filled with hatred. He had to turn around and avoid Li Yundong's fierce poke. His hand, which was about to pierce Li Yundong's Bai Hui acupoint, also quickly turned around and pinched the tip of Li Yundong's pen with 2 fingers. With a snap, as soon as his fingertips caught the pen, the zhenqi of the 2 men immediately collided. It was as if 2 fierce armies had suddenly met like a tide, causing their bodies to tremble violently. With a snap, the pen exploded into countless pieces. The moment the pen exploded, the door of the elevator in the stairwell also opened with a crash. Li Yundong's heart skipped a beat. He saw the fragments flying in all directions, and some of them flew straight into the elevator. These fragments were extremely powerful. If an ordinary person were to be hit by them, it would be no different from being hit by shrapnel. They would either die or be seriously injured. Li Yundong was quick to react. He turned around and retracted his arm. His arm returned to his sleeve in an instant. With a flick of his sleeve, it was like a wide and long soft whip, catching all the fragments that were flying toward him. However, as soon as Li Yundong turned around, he immediately turned his back to the person who had attacked him. All the vital points on his back were exposed to the opponent, which was the most disadvantageous position in fighting. Seeing that Li Yundong had given himself an opening, the other party didn't even think about it. He immediately stepped forward and slapped down with his palm. If his palm hit, even granite would be torn apart. However, Li Yundong seemed to have expected that the other party would take the opportunity to attack him. He grabbed the sleeve of the fragments and threw it back fiercely. Su Chan, Ruan Hongling, Xueqi, and the other cultivators also cheered. Zi Yuan said in her heart, Li Yundong's move is really a stroke of genius. His cultivation aptitude is rare in the world, and his talent in fighting is even more shocking. He can actually think of a way to deal with it in such a short period of time, and he can even defeat the enemy according to the surrounding environment and his own clothes. Amazing, really amazing. Just as Su Chan and the others were cheering, Li Yundong's sleeve hit the other party's palm with a bang, and all the fragments were firmly slapped into his palm. In the blink of an eye, the two of them fought like lightning and thunder. The man groaned and took a step back while covering his palm. At this time, the cheers of Su Chan and the others came out of their throats. Only then did two young women who were talking come out of the elevator. As soon as the two women walked out of the elevator, they heard the cheers of Su Chan and the others. They were shocked and widened their eyes. They looked at Li Yundong and the man in a helmet and sunglasses, who was covering his hand and lowering his head. For a moment, they didn't know what had happened. When the man saw that there were mortals from the secular world present, he immediately covered his hand, turned around, and walked into the elevator. Because there were two secular people present, Li Yundong didn't chase after him. He just stared at the elevator door like lightning. When the elevator door finally closed, he glanced at the two girls in a daze, picked up the package that had fallen to the ground with his foot, and then turned around and entered the door. After the door was closed, everyone gathered around and said, "Are you all right?" Su Chan patted her chest and said, "Yundong, your reaction is really fast. I didn't even come to my senses. If it had been me just now, I would have been dead." Zi Yuan also nodded and said, "Li Yundong's reaction is secondary. The flick of his sleeve just now was really exquisite. It was amazing. It seems that you haven't neglected your kung fu in the past few days." Xueqi and the others also praised, "Leader is so powerful. It was really dangerous just now. I thought that leader wouldn't be able to avoid it." Although Li Yundong had defeated the enemy in the blink of an eye and others had seen it easily, in fact, when Li Yundong and the others calmed down, they felt a lingering fear and a cold sweat broke out on their backs. Li Yundong's face was cold as he said, "This person's cultivation is definitely not inferior to mine. Just now, I didn't even notice that he was going to attack me. This shows that this person's chi hiding kung fu is almost close to the realm of returning to nature. Logically speaking, he should be a top master of a sect. Why would such a person be so despicable as to sneak attack me?" Zi Yuan sighed and said, "This is the trouble after you become famous. Everyone wants to defeat you. As long as they defeat you, they can spread the news everywhere. Since ancient times, there has been no first place in literature and no second place in martial arts. This is also the case in the cultivation world. After I became famous, many people came to challenge me. If I hadn't chosen to leave the secular world to cultivate, I would have been annoyed to death. Li Yundong, you are cultivating in the secular world, so you have to be more careful." After Zi Yuan said this, Ruan Hongling was stunned and looked at Zi Yuan strangely. She opened her mouth as if she wanted to say something, but she quickly swallowed it back and did not speak. Li Yundong's face was solemn. "I don't know which sect he is from, but he is so despicable." Zi Yuan frowned and said, "This person is wearing a helmet and sunglasses. Obviously, he doesn't want us to recognize his appearance. He used fighting skills to attack you, and he doesn't want us to recognize his sect from his magic. I think it will be very difficult to know his identity." Li Yundong's face was as dark as water. He raised his head and said, "In short, everyone should be careful. Tomorrow, we will move to a new house. At that time, we will live more scattered. You should be more careful." Everyone agreed in unison. After everyone had dispersed, Li Yundong called Su Chan and said, "Girl, judging from the situation of these two sneak attacks, the other party's methods are getting more and more despicable and shameless. You must stay by my side. Don't run around and don't leave my sight. Do you understand? Su Chan nodded with a smile and said, I know, sir. Although my cultivation is not high, it is not so easy for others to catch me. Li Yundong laughed and patted her head. At this time, Zi Yuan pulled Ruan Hongling into the room and whispered, Hongling, I think something is wrong. Ruan Hongling asked curiously, Sister Zi Yuan, why do you think something is wrong? Zi Yuan said, I always feel that since Li Yundong succeeded as the leader of the Fox Zen School, there seems to be a manipulator behind the scenes manipulating something, and a series of things are targeting him. Especially this series of sneak attacks, it's really unbelievable. Ruan Hongling said with a puzzled expression, I was wondering why you said that after you became famous, there were people who attacked you one after another. Your reputation was spread by everyone, not by fighting like Li Yundong. Moreover, you are one of the few female cultivators in the cultivation world who is beautiful, talented, and has a high cultivation. That's why you are respected as the top master of the younger generation. Zi Yuan nodded and said, Yes, everyone gives in to me. Some male cultivators see that I am a female cultivator, and it is not glorious to win. If I lose, it will be even more shameful, so no one has ever challenged me. Ruan Hongling asked curiously, Then why did you say that? Zi Yuan smiled slightly and said, I said it for Li Yundong to hear, but also for the traitor in the Fox Zen School. Ruan Hongling was shocked. A traitor? There is a traitor in the Fox Zen School? Zi Yuan nodded and said, Yes, when Li Yundong talked to me in private last time, he suspected that there was a traitor in the Fox Zen School. Now I am even more suspicious of this. After Li Yundong took over the Fox Zen School, a series of things happened. First, Zhang Sunhong was killed, and Lu Ye's body disappeared. Then, the bodies of the two big golden snakes were stolen. Then, there were sneak attacks one after another. Then, it was related to the appearance of Renyuan Jindan. Then, the Fox Zen School was besieged. Recently, I heard that the Medicine King Tripod and the Immortal Pen were going to appear. Moreover, in a while, the Taoist Assembly, which is held once every 4 years in the cultivation world, will be held. At that time, the leaders of all sects will gather and compete with each other. At that time, the sphere of influence of the cultivation world will be divided again. Zi Yuan frowned slightly and said, This series of things makes me feel that there seems to be someone in the cultivation world planning a terrifying conspiracy. Because according to my understanding, although there must be some people among the cultivators of the various sects who are not convinced by Li Yundong, they are definitely not as crazy as this. Someone must be instigating behind the scenes to focus the spearhead on Li Yundong. Speaking of this, Zi Yuan's voice suddenly sank. She said, I even suspect that if Li Yundong hadn't blocked that move just now, once this person killed Li Yundong, I suspect that he would definitely have started a massacre and the whole Fox Zen School would have been destroyed. Ruan Hongling opened her mouth wide and said, Sister Zi Yuan, are you thinking too much? Zi Yuan shook her head and said, No, last time you heard Second Sherbua say that there will be a great calamity in the cultivation world. Although Second Sherbua is an extreme person, she is not a person who likes to bluff. Now I am also thinking about what it will be. What does this have to do with the Fox Zen School, the traitor of the Fox Zen School, and Li Yundong? What does this series of things against Li Yundong have to do with this so-called great calamity? Ruan Hongling let out a cry and said, Sister Zi Yuan, I got it. Do you think that the traitor is? Without waiting for her to finish speaking, Zi Yuan said, I'm not sure yet, but since I said that to Li Yundong before, I wanted to numb this person. When he can't bear it anymore, he will reveal his foxtail and walk into the trap. Ruan Hongling suddenly laughed and said, Sister Zi Yuan, this room is full of foxes. When the time comes, everyone will have a foxtail. Won't they all be traitors? Zi Yuan also smiled and said, I didn't expect that the successor of our Linggong sect would be in the same room as the cultivators of the Fox Zen School. This is really unusual. Ruan Hongling formed a palm with one hand, bowed, and said, I don't know about immeasurable longevity and oddities, but I do know that someone has fallen in love with someone else, so she's always thinking about him. She can't wait to help him finish everything and make everything perfect. That's why she's condescending. Zi Yuan's heart suddenly trembled, and her cheeks turned red. She glared at Ruan Hongling and said angrily, Hongling, what nonsense are you talking about? Ruan Hongling smiled and said, I was right. You're blushing. Zi Yuan's face was solemn. She formed a palm with one hand, bowed her head, and said solemnly, Hongling, my greatest wish in this life is to follow in my master's footsteps and cultivate to become an immortal. The reason why I came to this mortal world is precisely because the appearance of Jindan is in response to my master's psalm. All of this is just a reflection of the moon in the water and a fleeting cloud for me. Ruan Hongling rarely saw Zi Yuan so serious. She also stopped smiling and asked softly, Sister Zi Yuan, are you really not tempted by him at all? Zi Yuan lowered her eyes and said softly, So what if I am tempted? So what if I'm not tempted? Hongling, the current situation is complicated and confusing like a ball of tangles, and it's precisely the time for us to take precautions against it. Let's not be entangled in these matters of love. Ruan Hongling nodded and didn't say anything more, but she sighed softly in her heart. Sister Zi Yuan, you still haven't answered my question. Second Sherba is a person with a high cultivation quotient, but he can't jump out of the secular world of love and hatred, can he? Since you have chosen to cultivate in the secular world, how can you be detached from it? Thinking of this, Ruan Hongling couldn't help but be a little dazed for a moment. Chapter 345. Go to watch net. Early the next morning, Li Yundong woke up from his meditation. At this time, Su Chan had already gotten up early with the little foxes. When they saw Li Yundong, they shouted in unison, Good morning, leader. Although Li Yundong had almost been killed by a sneak attack before, at this time, seeing a group of young and beautiful girls greeting him so crisply in the early morning, even if he was unhappy, it would all be gone. He finally felt that he had not been the leader for nothing. Go to watch net. Early in the morning, there was a group of beautiful girls surrounding him. What more could he ask for in this life? Li Yundong was in a good mood. He greeted them with a smile and said, You got up so early? Have you packed your luggage? Su Chan smiled and said, My luggage has been prepared for a long time. As for the others. Before she could finish speaking, the other little foxes said one after another, Leader, we have no luggage. Let's go. We can't wait any longer. That's right. Leader, we seem to have our own rooms. It's very uncomfortable and inconvenient to squeeze into the living room. That's right. You even stepped on someone when you got up to go to the toilet. Hey, second Xueqi, the one you stepped on was me. I asked who stepped on me when I was sleeping last night. Fourth Xueqi, you tripped me and I didn't even argue with you. How dare you accuse me first? Wow, second senior sister, you're too much. You've stepped on my arm until it's bruised. Look. Hey, stop it you too. Second senior sister, when you fell yesterday, it happened to be on my body. It hurt a lot. That's right. I was also pressed by you. Your chin hurt so much. Hey, what do you mean? I'm also a victim. If it wasn't for someone pressing on my stomach last night, would I have gone to the toilet? What? Who pressed your belly? Who slept next to you last night? Second Xueqi. Was it you? If it wasn't you, was it you? The little foxes looked over one by one and shook their heads. Finally, their eyes fell on Li Yundong and they said in unison, Leader, you be the judge. Li Yundong suddenly felt a headache coming on. It was great to have a group of little beauties surrounding him, but if they were noisy and chattering around him all day, he would suffer. Li Yundong quickly said with a straight face, Nonsense. We're all from the Fox Zen school, so we should be polite to each other. How can you care about such a thing? The little foxes all pouted, lowered their heads, looked aggrieved, and stopped talking. Li Yundong saw that although they were not convinced in their eyes, they didn't make any more noise. He said, Well, everyone, pack up and get ready to go. As soon as the little foxes heard that they could move to a new home, they were up. Said. Chao E. Sherbua, who had been watching from the side for a while, suddenly said, Don't be so happy. You eat and drink for free all day long. You should work harder to help leader share some of his burdens. The little foxes had been with Li Yundong for a long time, and their awe of him had gradually disappeared. Their desire to get close to him gradually grew. They immediately ran up to him one by one with smiles on their faces. Leader, let me massage your back. Leader, let me massage your back. Leader, let me massage you. Seeing this, Su Chan immediately hugged Li Yundong nervously and looked at them warily. What do you want? Yundong is mine. Don't touch him. The little foxes said angrily, Su-chan, you are too overbearing. The leader belongs to all of us. What's wrong with us caring about the leader? After that, they swarmed up to her and massaged her back and shoulders, trying to please her. Su-chan's fists were no match for 4 hands, and she was soon overwhelmed. Li Yundong only felt that all he could see in front of him were snow-white arms. The little foxes were very hot, and their breasts and buttocks were waving in front of him. His nose was full of powder. Li Yundong thought to himself, oh my, even the most determined revolutionary soldier will betray us sooner or later. What can I do? Li Yundong's face darkened, and his voice implied the cultivation method of the mantra Mahamudra. He shouted, stand still. How can you be so presumptuous in front of the leader? Hearing his shout, the little foxes suddenly trembled all over, and their foxy nature was greatly restrained. They all retreated in fear. Seeing this, Xueqi came up to smooth things over and said, okay, let's carry some things. It can be considered as helping the leader solve his problems. After that, she opened the door that had been stuffed with tea goods and said, we've divided the goods inside into bags. Everyone can carry a few bags and try to move them all at once. Li Yundong took a closer look and was shocked. There were 30 or 40 plastic bags here, and each of them was the size of 4 basketballs. With the figures of the little foxes of the Fox Zen school, if they picked up 2 bags, they would be unable to see them. Li Yundong sucked in a breath of cold air. Where the hell did you guys find so many plastic bags? Xueqi smiled and said, Zhenren Ziyuan brought them here. Then she said to the other juniors, what are you waiting for? Come and get them. After that, she carried 2 bags in each hand. Li Yundong saw that Xueqi had carried 4 bags, and half of her body could not be seen. She had become extremely cumbersome. He asked in surprise, can you afford it? Xueqi smiled and said, leader, you underestimate us too much. Although our cultivation quotients are low and we can't fight, we can still afford these things. Li Yundong smiled and said, seeing that you are all stunning beauties, I forgot that you are all cultivators. That's right, it's impossible for cultivators to not be able to carry such small things. Li Yundong waved to the little foxes and said, little ones, go get your things. Let's go to our new home. The little foxes laughed and agreed. They all rushed to the bags. Some were carrying 2 bags, while others were carrying 3. Xueqi, who had just come out of the room, was also carrying a bag. At this time, Ziyuan and Ruan Hongling also came. When they saw this, they smiled and said, it's so lively. Everyone has a share? Well, let's also carry 2 bags, shall we? As she said this, Ziyuan also carried 4 bags, and Ruan Hongling also carried 2. But when Li Yundong finally wanted to carry, he suddenly found that the last few bags had been carried by Ziyuan, Ruan Hongling, and the others. He smiled and said, you've all carried. What should I carry? By the way, I still have some luggage. Let me carry this. At this time, Su-chan immediately jumped over and dragged out the suitcase that had been packed long ago. She said with a smile, I'll carry it. This is our thing. I want to carry it myself. Li Yundong spread his hands helplessly and said, you all have things to carry. What should I carry? Xueqi laughed and said, since you are the leader of the sect, why do you need to carry things? Just leave this kind of thing to us. Li Yundong was a little embarrassed and said shyly, it's not good to let a group of beautiful women carry things while I, a man, am empty-handed, right? At this time, Ziyuan couldn't help but spit with a smile and said, bah, look at the corners of your eyes. Don't show off your cleverness here. Sure enough, Li Yundong laughed and waved his hand. Okay, little ones, let's go. The group of people came out of Hongxing New area. On the way, they made the eyes of passers-by pop out. One by one, they said in shock, no way, such a large group of beautiful women are holding so many things in their hands and surrounding a man. How could this man be empty-handed? I'm not mistaken, am I? Can this kind of thing exist in today's society? I'm not living in the old society, am I? When Li Yundong and his group arrived at Riverside New Village, they immediately attracted a lot of people's attention. Fortunately, there were many luxurious houses in this community. Many of the houses were empty houses bought by rich people, but no one lived in them. The occupancy rate was not high, so they did not attract a large number of onlookers. After the group of people entered the room, they divided the rooms. Li Yundong asked for a bedroom on the second floor on the east side of the rooftop. Xueqi and Xueqi shared a room downstairs on the west side. Xueqi of the Fox Zen School lived in the room next to Li Yundong, and the other 4 little foxes lived in the 2 rooms downstairs. Lu Yuehong, Zhuang Yiting, Zi Yuan, Ruan Hongling, and the remaining 3 little foxes lived in the suite next door. As a result, the room suddenly became much more spacious. Now that the little foxes had a new home, they gathered in the living room of Li Yundong's room one by one. They were so excited that they jumped up and down in the room, almost making a ruckus. Seeing that they were excited, Li Yundong didn't want to care about them. It was rare for them to be happy. But not long after, the doorbell rang. With the experience of the last sneak attack, Li Yundong learned his lesson this time. He covered his whole body with Xueqi and opened the door secretly. But as soon as he opened the door, he saw a middle-aged woman wearing a red armband standing at the door aggressively. She looked inside and saw that the room was full of stunning beauties. She was suddenly shocked and scared. She thought that there was some official or rich second generation living in the room with an extremely scary background. The middle-aged woman had originally looked like she was going to interrogate them, but at this time, her momentum dropped. She squeezed out a smile and said, "Hello, I'm from the property office of the community. Someone complained that you were too noisy, so I came up to see if you could be a little quieter." Only then did Li Yundong understand. He laughed and said, "I'm sorry, I didn't manage them well. I'll talk about them in a while." After that, Li Yundong turned around and shouted at the little foxes, "Be quiet. Didn't you see that someone came to complain?" The little foxes were frightened by Li Yundong and immediately quieted down. They stuck out their tongues and made a gesture of silence. Soon, the room became quiet. When the middle-aged woman saw that these beauties had immediately quieted down after Li Yundong's shout, she was more and more certain of her thoughts. This young and handsome man must be the children of officials or rich people. I can't afford to offend him. I must avoid him in the future. The middle-aged woman's smile became more and more attentive. Haha, just be careful in the future. There's nothing else. If you have any problems in the future, you can come to our property office. We will definitely help you solve them. Li Yundong smiled and said, Okay. After sending the middle-aged woman away, Li Yundong turned around and said with a straight face, "Are you still cultivators? You're just a group of prisoners who have just been released from prison. Especially you, Xueqi. You took the lead in making a fuss. What a disgrace." As soon as Li Yundong scolded them, the little foxes immediately lowered their heads, and Xueqi's chin almost touched her chest. After being reprimanded by Li Yundong, the little foxes watched Li Yundong leave. They looked at each other and said, "What should we do?" After being scolded by Li Yundong, they lowered their voices, as if they were thieves. The little foxes all looked at Xueqi and said, "Xueqi, you've been in the mortal world longer than we have. Do you know anything else that's fun?" Just as she was about to shout, she remembered what Li Yundong had said just now. She quickly covered her mouth with her hand and whispered in a low voice, "I got it. Let's watch soap operas." Xueqi thought for a moment, then her heart skipped a beat and her eyebrows lit up. The little foxes immediately beamed with joy. Okay. Seeing that they were a little happy, Xueqi didn't feel that her voice had become louder again. She immediately made a gesture of silence and said, "Don't make any noise." The little foxes responded, "Oh, no. Keep quiet." Xueqi rolled her eyes and said, "I'll go ask Yundong and see if he'll let us watch it." As she said this, Xueqi quietly went up the stairs, then tentatively pushed the door open. She poked her head out, rolled her eyes and shouted softly, "Yundong!" Li Yundong saw Xueqi acting like a thief in the room, and immediately felt angry and amused. He said, "What are you doing? Can we watch TV?" Xueqi asked meekly. Li Yundong couldn't help laughing and said, "Nonsense, just don't make it too loud." Xueqi immediately cheered. "Master, you're the best. I love you so much." As she said this, she quickly rushed in, hugged Li Yundong, and kissed him hard on the cheek. Then, she rushed out like a gust of wind. Li Yundong said with a smile, "Hey, you can watch it, but don't make trouble." Be careful not to get complained again. Su Chan's clear voice came from outside the door. Got it. Li Yundong shook his head and couldn't help laughing. He sat cross-legged in the room and was about to chi when suddenly there was a sound of TV music coming from the living room. Li Yundong was dumbfounded when he heard it. He thought to himself, it's fine if you're just watching TV. Find something good to watch, but you're actually watching cartoons. It's fine if you're watching cartoons, but you're actually watching such an old cartoon. It's fine if you're watching such an old cartoon, but you're even singing the theme song. Li Yundong only heard a very familiar piece of music coming from the living room. The little foxes hummed along, play with each other, 7 flowers on 1 egg, the desire to commit a crime is great, but you're not afraid, la 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 la. Little brother, play with each other. Little brother, play with each other. Chapter 346. Go to watch net. Li Yundong was stunned as he listened to the voices coming from the living room. He thought to himself, no way. How could they sing such sexy lyrics? Who taught them? It can't be Su Chan again, can it? Li Yundong quickly jumped up, opened the door, and went downstairs. At this time, he saw that the little foxes had finished singing. They were sitting cross-legged on the ground in a circle, staring at the 47-inch plasma TV in the living room. They didn't even notice Li Yundong's presence. Go to watch net. Li Yundong saw that they all looked innocent and didn't seem to be playing a prank just now. He thought to himself, who taught them to sing this song? Could it be that I heard it wrong? No, it can't be, right? Li Yundong stood by and watched for a while. Seeing that they were so fascinated that they didn't even notice that he was standing beside them, he thought to himself, good heavens, if a sneak attack comes, even a child can put you down together. Is this Calabash Brothers so good? Which TV station is so unpromising that it would broadcast such an old cartoon? Li Yundong looked up and suddenly gasped. CCTV Children's Channel. Oh, you guys are a little smaller. At this time, there was a scene of the Calabash Brothers being caught by the snake demon and the scorpion spirit. They took off their pants and peed to tease them. The funniest thing was that there was a small piece of mosaic on the vital parts of the camera. The little foxes suddenly asked curiously, what's that? It's a blurry ball? Next to them, a little fox immediately scolded with a smile, idiot, it's a man's thing. Don't you know? Oh, then why did it look like this? I don't know. Ask Xueqi Su Chan. She has a lot of experience in the mortal world. She must know. Su Chan didn't know what mosaic was. She saw that the little foxes were all looking at her, and she didn't want to show weakness in front of them. She rolled her eyes and immediately saw Li Yundong standing beside her. The little girl seemed to have seen her savior. She smiled and said, the leader is here. Ask him and let him answer. Li Yundong's face was full of surprise. He secretly glared at Su Chan, coughed dryly, and said, This thing is actually called mosaic. It's used to cover, some very sensitive places. Yeah, that's about it. Li Yundong was usually a sharp-tongued and eloquent person. At this time, when he was explaining this question in front of a group of beautiful women, he felt a layer of sweat suddenly appear on his back, and he stuttered. After the explanation, the little foxes suddenly understood. Oh, so that's how it is. Su Chan's face was also full of sudden understanding, but she soon looked puzzled. She unconsciously looked at Li Yundong's lower body and asked, but why didn't you censor it? He wanted nothing more than to grab Su Chan and spank her but 500 times. When the other little foxes heard Su Chan's question, their eyes fell on Li Yundong's lower body in unison. Their eyes were full of ambiguity and they giggled. Watch net. Li Yundong glared at Su Chan. Are you a pig? How dare you ask me something like that? Su Chan looked confused. Ha! What's wrong with this question? Is there something wrong? Seeing that she was still at a loss, Li Yundong became more and more frantic. He couldn't help shouting, how can you ask such a question? You are really a pig, as stupid as a pig. Being scolded by Li Yundong in public, Su Chan immediately pouted and said, I don't know. If I don't know, I'll ask. What's wrong with that? I'm not a pig. Li Yundong was so angry that he laughed. It would be strange if you weren't a pig. Yes, I'll change your name in the future. I'll call you a pig. Su Chan stamped her feet and said angrily, You are a pig. I'm not a pig. After venting his anger, Li Yundong laughed triumphantly and said, Pig monster, you are a pig monster. Su Chan was so angry that she was about to pounce on Li Yundong, but she saw Zi Yuan, Ruan Hongling, and the other people of the Fox Zen School jumping over from the balcony. Li Yundong didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Can't you go through the door? There is such a thing in this world called a door. Zi Yuan smiled slightly, and Ruan Hongling made a face at him. What's the difference? Isn't this also a door? It's just a back door. Li Yundong sighed and said, the idea of Chinese going through the back door is really deep-rooted, even for cultivators. I have no idea. His words made the group of people cover their mouths and laugh. At this time, Xueqi, Xueqi, and the others also came down from upstairs, and the spacious living room suddenly became crowded. Li Yundong looked at Zi Yuan and asked, What are you doing here? Zi Yuan nodded and said, Yes, we bought the shop yesterday. Why don't we go and get the business license for the shop today? By the way, we can think about what the name of the shop should be. Hearing this, everyone suddenly became excited, especially the little foxes of the Fox Zen School. They began to chatter excitedly. Hey, what do you think the name of the shop should be? In my opinion, it should be called Fox Tea House. Are you an idiot? Are you afraid that others won't know that it's a tea shop opened by our Fox Zen School? Aren't you afraid that people from other sects will come and make trouble? Let's just call it Rock Tea House. How about using the name of our ancestor to name it? What's so good about it? It's not as good as the previous one. Rock Tea House. How unpleasant it sounds. They kept talking noisily, and Li Yundong couldn't find a chance to get a word in edgewise. Seeing this, Xueqi coughed dryly to attract the attention of the little foxes. Then she scolded them. What are you doing? Is it up to you to decide on a name? Of course, it's up to the leader. Li Yundong laughed and said, It doesn't matter. Let's express our opinions one by one. We'll choose the best one when the time comes. Let's go. 7K. Oath M. Li Yundong looked at Zi Yuan and said, Zi Yuan, you've contributed the most to the whole thing. What do you want to name it? Zi Yuan smiled slightly and said, I haven't thought about it either. Why don't you name it? Li Yundong looked at Ruan Hongling again and asked, Hongling, what do you want to name it? Ruan Hongling didn't stand on ceremony. After thinking for a moment she said, I remember when Sister Zi Yuan went on stage to perform the tea art last time. The scene was really full of clouds and mist, like a fairyland on earth. I think we should call it Yunwu Tea House. After she finished speaking, Li Yundong laughed and said, Yunwu is a kind of tea. If you name it like this, people who really want to drink tea will think that you only buy Yunwu tea here. Zi Yuan smiled and teased. Then we should call it Guanyin Tea House. Most of our tea is Tiguanyin tea. Ruan Hongling said angrily, You want me to name it again. After I give it a name, you join hands to laugh at me. It's really a case of a husband and a wife following each other. You're so annoying. Zi Yuan suddenly blushed and glared at Ruan Hongling angrily. Li Yundong also looked very embarrassed. He coughed dryly and quickly changed his target. He looked at Xueqi and said, Xueqi, do you have any good ideas? Xueqi smiled and said, What good ideas do I have? Seeing that she was unwilling to say anything, Li Yundong knew that Xueqi had just started cultivating, so she seemed very cautious, for fear of saying something wrong. He smiled and didn't force her. He looked away again. Su Chan couldn't hold it in any longer. She raised her hand high and shouted, I have a good name. Li Yundong pretended to be angry and glared at her. Pig monster, shut up. You're too stupid. We don't want to hear your name. Su Chan's face suddenly fell. She shouted angrily, You're so annoying. You're the pig monster. Li Yundong held back his laughter and deliberately avoided looking at her. Then he looked at Xueqi and said, Xueqi Sherbua, what name do you think we should give it? Xueqi smiled and said, Leader, this is your shop. It's not up to us to give it a name. Li Yundong waved his hand and said with a smile, You can't say that. This is also our Fox Zen School. Oh no, it's a joint business between our Fox Zen School and the Linggong sect of Zhengyi School. Since our Fox Zen School has a share, you also have a share. Xueqi Sherbua, You don't have to be so polite. Seeing that she couldn't refuse, Xueqi thought for a moment and said, since it's a tea house, and it's in the middle of a secular city, I think we might as well give it an elegant and popular name. Why don't we call it Lin Xian? Lu Yuehong, who was standing next to her, suddenly smiled. Lin Xian is indeed not bad. It means that you are about to ascend to heaven after drinking tea, but I think it's better to call it ascending to immortality. Zhuang Yuting also said, I think it's best to call it Tong Xian. Lu Tong of the Tang dynasty once wrote a poem. 1 bowl of tea to moisten the throat, 2 bowls to break the loneliness, 3 bowls to search the withered intestines, and only 5,000 volumes of words. 4 bowls of sweat. All the injustices in my life will disperse into my pores. 5 bowls of muscle and bone cleansing, and 6 bowls of Tong Xian spirit. It's called Tong Xian, which is poetic. It's popular and elegant. Isn't it just right? After she finished speaking, Li Yundong immediately clapped his hands and praised. Good, good. Shibua Zhuang Yiting is really well read. This name is good. At this time, Xueqi, who had been unwilling to express her opinion, also nodded slightly. She added, the shop we rented is quite large. I think we can set up 3 tea houses, one called Lin Xian, one called Ascending to Immortality, and one called Tong Xian. These 3 names represent the 3 realms of tea drinking. It's just right to set up a 3-level VIP tea house, with Tong Xian being the highest and the tea inside being the best, and so on. What do you think? Li Yundong looked at her with appreciation and said, not bad. You are indeed a girl from a noble family. It's a good idea to amaze the world with a single brilliant feat. Xueqi was encouraged and secretly rejoiced. She then said, we can also set up 3 VIP cards, similar to silver cards, gold cards, and diamond cards. The level of customers will be determined by their consumption. After she finished speaking, the others all praised her. This decision respected the opinions of the 3 seniors of the Fox Zen School, and clearly differentiated the management method of the tea house. Zi Yuan glanced at Xueqi and said with a smile, this is really a good idea. Li Yundong, you have accepted a good disciple. Xueqi also smiled and said, now that leader has such a capable disciple, he doesn't need us anymore. Xueqi smiled modestly and said, you flatter me, everyone. I just summarized everyone's ideas and synthesized them. There's nothing to boast about. Li Yundong laughed and said, okay, stop flattering each other. It's settled. Ruan Hongling suddenly asked curiously, what's settled? It's the names of the 3 tea houses, not the tea house. Can't the 3 names be hung outside the tea house at the same time? Wouldn't that be a mess? Hearing her words, everyone finally reacted and looked at each other in dismay. Li Yundong also said in a low voice, yes, I wouldn't have thought of it if you hadn't mentioned it. Su Chan, who was standing to one side, finally seized the opportunity and taunted Li Yundong proudly. Look, you call me a pig. I think you are the pig. Stupid. Li Yundong glared at her and said, yes, I am a pig. It would be strange if you were a pig. Pig monster. Do you have any good ideas? When Su Chan saw Li Yundong talking about her like this in front of so many people, she stamped her feet angrily and said, you are a pig monster. Li Yundong laughed and said, then you give me a good name. I will admit that you are not a pig monster. Zi Yuan and the others saw Li Yundong and Su Chan bickering. Li Yundong's every word was taking advantage of Su Chan, but Su Chan didn't react and just foolishly followed Li Yundong's words. They all covered their mouths and snickered. Su Chan didn't realize that Li Yundong was teasing her. When she saw Li Yundong asking her to give him a name, she was overjoyed. She put her hands on her hips and said proudly, you finally remembered to give me a name? With this girl's intelligence, wisdom, and vigor, I will definitely come up with a good name. Li Yundong held back his laughter and said, yes, yes, Miss Pig Monster, hurry up and give us a name. Su Chan stamped her feet and shouted, don't call me Pig Monster. Li Yundong laughed so hard that his intestines were about to break. He said, okay, I will definitely not call you pigs. Su Chan didn't hear the change in the meaning of Li Yundong's words. Seeing that Li Yundong was no longer speaking, she shook her head and said, previously, the 3 Shibua said that there were 3 immortals, 1 Lin Xian, 1 Deng Xian, and 1 Tong Xian. In my opinion, We might as well call our tea house Desanxian. Li Yundong couldn't help laughing and said, Desanxian? Isn't that a dish? Why do you only know how to eat? How can you say that you are not a pig? If you are not a pig, then what are you? By the way, you are not a pig. It would be strange if you were a pig monster. Su Chan only felt that the name she had given was excellent. Originally, she looked at Li Yundong expectantly, waiting for him to praise her. Unexpectedly, Li Yundong ridiculed her in such a way. She suddenly became flustered and angry and shouted, It would be strange if I wasn't a pig monster. This time, everyone in the room burst out laughing, and Li Yundong laughed so hard that he almost died. Su Chan looked at everyone laughing. She was stunned and hadn't come to her senses yet. She only felt wronged and sad in her heart. I gave myself such a good name. Why are they still laughing at me? Especially Yundong, who took the lead in laughing at me. Su Chan felt wronged in her heart. She was really more wronged than Do-yi. Her eyes were full of tears, her nose twitched, and she burst into tears. She choked and said, It would be strange if I wasn't a pig monster. Under the care of my wife, I'm much better. Thank you for your concern. Chapter 347. Go to watch net. Everyone in the room laughed so hard that they fell down. Li Yundong laughed so hard that he didn't even have the image of a leader. He held his stomach and rocked back and forth, completely heartless. Go to watch net. Xueqi saw more and more tears in the girl's eyes. It was obvious that she was about to cry. Xueqi held back her laughter, walked over, and whispered a few words in Su Chan's ear. Su Chan realized that she had fallen into Li Yundong's trap. She had admitted that she was a pig. Her eyes suddenly went blank. After a while, her face turned red. She pounced on Li Yundong, baring her teeth and brandishing her claws. You're so annoying. You're a pig. Li Yundong laughed so hard that his stomach hurt. Su Chan pounced on him, scratching and biting him. He quickly begged for mercy. Okay. You're not a pig. I'm a pig. Su Chan was so angry that she shouted, You're still taking advantage of me? After that, she pounced on Li Yundong's back like an octopus and bit his ear with her teeth. Li Yundong put his palms together and smiled. Okay, I was wrong. Don't make trouble. Hurry up and get down. We still have business to talk about. Su Chan knew when to stop. She snorted and said arrogantly, I'm not getting down. You bully me. I'm going to bully you too. You can talk behind my back. Li Yundong threatened her with a straight face. If you don't get down, I'll spank you. Su Chan thought to herself anyway, I just lost face. Now, no matter what you say, I won't get down. She put her arms around Li Yundong's neck and buried her head in his broad back. I won't get down, she said shamelessly. Li Yundong was at his wit's end. He couldn't really spank her in front of so many people. Could he? Li Yundong smiled helplessly at the people in the room. He straightened up and coughed as if he was carrying a big doll on his back. In the room, everyone from the Fox Zen school looked at Li Yundong strangely. They were all trying hard to hold back their laughter. Zi Yuan smiled slightly and said, In fact, to be fair, the name of the shop that Su Chan just mentioned is actually quite good. Desanxian. First, it's homophonic. Second, it's loud. Third, it's very elegant. Fourth, it's very suitable for our shop. It's indeed a good name. I suggest using this name. As soon as she spoke, Wan Hongling naturally responded, I also agree. Chao Yi and the others from the Fox Zen school also nodded. Yes, it's a good name. Watch net. 7K. M. Su Chan poked her head out from behind Li Yundong and said proudly, What do you think? I told you I was the one who came up with the name. Li Yundong turned his hand back and made a Mahamudra. With a snap, he slapped the girl's buttocks hard. Su Chan let out a loud cry, immediately attracting everyone's attention. The little girl blushed with shame and shrank her head back. Li Yundong carried the little girl on his back, his expression unchanged. He pretended that nothing had happened. He made a decision and said, Okay, that's the name. Xueqi also laughed. I know a good calligrapher. When the time comes, We can ask him to write a few words and then mount them. Then we'll have our own plaque. Everyone praised him in unison, but Li Yundong smiled and said, No, why spend money to hire someone if we don't use the great calligrapher in front of us? Xueqi asked curiously, Is there a great calligrapher among us? Li Yundong looked at Zi Yuan with a smile. I saw Zi Yuan's calligraphy last time, and it was very good. I wonder if she's willing to write it? Zi Yuan immediately remembered that when she was writing the Psalms, she had been in a daze and had been seen by Li Yundong. Her heart tightened, and her expression became a little unnatural. Guan Hongling didn't know the crux of the matter. She immediately clapped her hands and said with a smile, Good. My Xueqi's calligraphy is ranked among the best in the cultivation world. At this time, Su Chan poked her head out again, but she was not as arrogant as last time. She said weakly, My calligraphy is also very good. When Li Yundong had reunited with Su Chan in Shantang, he had seen her calligraphy, and it was indeed very beautiful. Li Yundong was well aware of this, but he wanted to make fun of the little girl, so he sighed and said, Alas, in fact, your calligraphy is also very good. It's just a little bit worse than Zi Yuan's. Su Chan was obviously very proud of her calligraphy. Seeing that Li Yundong's tone was a little strange, she said unhappily, How much is a little bit worse? Li Yundong put his thumb and index finger together, leaving only a little gap, and then pretended to say, Just a little bit worse. Go to the internet. 7K. M. Seeing that Li Yundong finally didn't taunt her anymore, Su Chan snorted and said, Does it count as a little bit worse? Li Yundong sighed and said, Yes, in fact, it's just a little bit worse. Alas, it's a pity. It's probably just a little bit worse. A little bit worse. Suddenly, everyone burst into laughter again. Su Chan was so angry that she shouted, You're bullying me again. I don't care, I also want to write. It was rare for the little girl to be so serious. In her opinion, the startup capital of this tea house was earned by Li Yundong and Zi Yuan together, and the management method and direction of opening the tea house were all Zhou Qin's ideas. Of these two women, one was Li Yundong's confidant who was both a teacher and a friend, and the other was Li Yundong's first disciple. Not only was their beauty and temperament not inferior to hers, but their relationship with Li Yundong was also very ambiguous. If the little girl didn't feel a little jealous in her heart, it would definitely be a lie. The most important thing was that, in the little girl's opinion, if she, as his real girlfriend, couldn't leave her mark on the first bucket of gold in Li Yundong's life and couldn't help him at all, even if Li Yundong didn't have any ideas, she would definitely feel regret and be very sad when she thought about it in the future. Li Yundong froze for a moment when he saw the serious look on Su Chan's face. Then he smiled and said, Well, to be fair, let's have a fair competition later. Everyone writes, and whoever writes the best will get to use their words. What do you think? Xueqi smiled and said, Leader, you make the decision. You can use whoever you think is better. Li Yundong saw that as soon as he said this, the little foxes of the Fox Zen school were also tempted, and their eyes were shining. He smiled and said, Don't be a dictator. Everyone writes. The eyes of the masses are bright. It's not just my empty words. Come on, who has a brush, ink, paper, and inkstone? Hurry up and bring them up. Coincidentally, the Fox Zen school didn't have much luggage, but they had lived in seclusion in the Taoist temple before. Most of them had practiced writing to cultivate their moral character, so they happened to have these things in their luggage. Soon, the little foxes took out the brush, ink, paper, and inkstone as if they were asking for credit. Li Yundong pointed to the desk in the dining room next to him and said, Let's write there. Who wants to go first? The little foxes were all excited. Me. Li Yundong smiled and said, Don't shout, don't push. Do it one by one. The little foxes rushed to write the words de sanction one by one, and then showed them to Li Yundong one by one. When they got a word of praise from him, they stood to the side with smiles on their faces. At first, Su Chan looked at them nervously, for fear that their handwriting would surpass hers. But when they finished writing, Su Chan suddenly breathed a sigh of relief and felt proud in her heart. Fortunately, I used to practice writing with my master a lot. Otherwise, I would have made a fool of myself today. Although the handwriting of my fellow sisters is good, there is still a gap between them and mine. When Xueqi and the others finished writing one by one, Su Chan felt even more relieved. She saw that although Xueqi and Lu Yuehong's handwriting was beautiful, it was not as lively as hers. It lacked a certain charm. On the contrary, Sherbo Zhuang Yiting, who looked the most coquettish, had written a delicate and fresh thin golden body, which surprised everyone. Li Yundong saw that everyone's handwriting was different and beautiful. Although he didn't understand calligraphy, he also felt that all the words were extremely beautiful. He nodded and praised. Not bad, they are all good handwriting. I didn't expect that all of you would have good handwriting. He looked up at Ruan Hongling and said, Hongling, don't you want to write? Ruan Hongling responded and was about to pick up the brush to write, but as soon as she did so, she seemed to think of something. She asked with a smile, Zhenren Li, as the leader of the sect, why don't you write? Li Yundong shook his hands and said, No, I can draw talismans, but I can't write anything. Ruan Hongling didn't believe him. She snorted and said, Is it because your identity is different now, so you don't want to do it easily? As soon as she said this, the others also joined in. Leader, write one. Li Yundong couldn't refuse, so he made up his mind, rolled up his sleeves, and said loudly, Well, since you are willing to die, I am willing to bury you. Prepare to stab your own eyes later. Hearing this, everyone laughed, but they became more and more curious, so they all came forward to watch. They saw Li Yundong pick up the brush and calmly draw a circle on the rice paper. Moreover, the circle was irregular. They were suddenly speechless and thought, What is this? After a while, Li Yundong picked up the brush again and drew another circle. This time, the circle was long and had a strip on it. Everyone was confused and became more and more confused. They began to discuss, What is the leader writing? Su Chan even giggled and said, Yundong, are you really drawing talismans? Li Yundong ignored her and finally drew another circle. This time, this circle was larger than the previous two, and it had a big tail and a small head. There was also a strip on the head. After Li Yundong finished drawing, he threw the brush and said loudly, Well, I'm done. You can stab your own eyes. Ruan Hongling was confused. Hey, what the hell are you doing? What are you writing? Which language is it? Is it Martian language? Su Chan giggled and said, That's right. If you want us to stab our own eyes, we have to be convinced. Li Yundong glared at her and then said to Ruan Hongling in surprise, Oh, you know Martian language. You're quite fashionable. Ruan Hongling rolled her eyes at him and said, Tell me, what are you writing? Li Yundong proudly pointed to the first irregular circle and said, This is a potato. Then he pointed to the second smaller circle with a strip and said, This is a pepper. Then he pointed to the last one and said, This is an eggplant. Li Yundong clapped his hands and said, Isn't this the authentic San Xian? Before he could finish his words, everyone was already laughing. Su Chan even covered her stomach and laughed exaggeratedly. Oh my God, I really have to stab my own eyes. This is too ugly. Li Yundong said exaggeratedly in a loud voice. What do you know? This is the painting method of calligraphy, the calligraphy method of painting. It can be called a peerless work of calligraphy and painting. Su Chan smiled and rushed over to snatch the painting, which looked like a talisman, and hid it behind her. Well, then I'll collect your work and leave it for your disciples and granddisciples to see in the future. I'll let them see the calligraphy of their grandmaster and the leader, so that they can worship it in the future. Li Yundong was so angry that he scolded with a smile, Little girl, if you have the ability, don't make any mistakes later. Otherwise, I'll beat your ass. How dare you laugh at the leader? Su Chan jumped up and snorted. I'll write it. Well. I'll make a small adjustment. The 3 chapters this week will be concentrated in 234, which means that tomorrow, I'll continue with the 3rd chapter. Chapter 348. Go to Watch Network. Su Chan picked up the brush and stood in front of the table. She closed her eyes for a while and waited for the laughter to stop. Then, she opened her eyes and wrote the words, Desanxian, with a solemn face. Everyone took a look and saw that Su Chan's handwriting was beautiful, and her strokes could be said to be smooth and free. There was a kind of indescribable intelligence and elegance. Except for Li Yundong's bad handwriting, everyone else present was good at it. When they saw this good handwriting, they all cheered. Su Chan proudly put down the brush and said to Li Yundong with a smile, "How is it?" Li Yundong praised her in his heart, but pretended to be angry and glared at her. "What are you so proud of? There are still 2 more to write." Li Yundong said to Xueqi, "My good disciple, it's your turn. Hurry up and support me." Xueqi thought of the sanxian that Li Yundong had used just now, and she couldn't help but burst into laughter. Li Yundong said angrily, "Hey, are you kidding me? How dare you laugh at your master?" Xueqi quickly smiled apologetically and said, "No, how dare I?" Li Yundong looked at her suspiciously and said, "Really? How is your handwriting? If it's the same as mine, don't make a fool of yourself." Xueqi pursed her lips and said with a smile, I'm just a little better than you." Su Chan immediately chimed in, "Just a little bit stronger. That little bit is like a world of difference." Everyone laughed. Li Yundong laughed and scolded, "You little girl, you're waiting for me here." After laughing for a while, Xueqi walked to the table, concentrated, and then wrote the words de sanxian. At this time, everyone understood her background. They knew that Xueqi was originally an official's daughter, and later gave up everything to cultivate with Li Yundong. They had thought that Xueqi's calligraphy cultivation should be limited, but at this time, they saw that Xueqi was writing in semi-cursive script. Her handwriting was dignified and steady, majestic, and her words were strong and powerful, revealing an unbending momentum. Su Chan sighed in her heart and couldn't help but admire Xueqi a little more. She thought to herself, as the saying goes, the handwriting is like the person. Only a person who can write like this can do such a thing. Zi Yuan also nodded and praised. "Good calligraphy, it is indeed good calligraphy. However, although the calligraphy is good, the craftsmanship is too heavy. It's not as nimble as Su Chan's." Xueqi also put down the brush and said with a smile, "Of course. Su Chan's words seem to be alive, as if they can jump out. I can't compare with her." Su Chan was overjoyed when she heard that. Her eyes narrowed into slits as she smiled. At this time, everyone except Zi Yuan had finished writing. Li Yundong smiled and said to Zi Yuan, "It's your turn, isn't it?" Zi Yuan waved her hand and said, "No, just use Su Chan's handwriting. Her handwriting is very good." Li Yundong smiled and said, "Excessive modesty is equal to arrogance. Everyone has written, but you don't. Are you looking down on us?" Zi Yuan smiled helplessly and said, "Well, then I'll embarrass myself." After saying that, she walked to the table, grabbed her sleeve with one hand, and gently grabbed the brush with the other. Li Yundong saw that her posture was elegant, and the hand holding the brush revealed a part of her wrist. Her skin was really as white as snow. Before she started writing, there was a different kind of charm that went straight into people's hearts. Zi Yuan composed herself and then wrote 3 words on the paper. When everyone looked at them, they saw that the 3 words were really like dancing dragons and phoenixes. They were immortal and elegant, and there was a kind of otherworldly aura between the lines. Everyone was a knowledgeable person, so they all cheered loudly. Xueqi praised, "These 3 de sanxian characters are the real immortals. They are really peerless and make people feel relaxed and happy." Su Chan was still a little unconvinced. She picked up Zi Yuan's words and looked at them. She glanced at the back of the paper and saw that her own words were also clearly printed below. She flipped through a few more pages and saw that the handwriting below was also very clear. Su Chan was immediately convinced and sighed. Zhenren Zi Yuan is indeed the future leader of the Linggong sect. Not to mention her cultivation, her handwriting is really powerful. Amazing. Su Chan turned to Li Yundong and said sincerely, "Yundong, you can use Zhenren Zi Yuan's words. Her handwriting is indeed better than mine." Li Yundong chuckled and stroked her head. "Are you sure?" Su Chan nodded. Although she was smiling, there was a trace of sadness in the corner of her eyes. When Li Yundong saw this, his heart skipped a beat. After waiting for everyone to discuss for a while, he saw that Su Chan had found an excuse to return to her room, so he also quietly hid Su Chan's words and went to her room. When Su Chan saw Li Yundong come in, she was stunned, and then she pouted and said, "Are you here to laugh at me?" "Laugh, laugh. I'm not as good as you." Li Yundong walked over with a smile, hugged the little girl, and then let her sit on his lap. Then, he hugged her tightly and kissed her. Li Yundong said softly, "Silly girl, Look at what this is. After that, he took out a folded piece of paper. Su-chan looked at it and saw that it was the calligraphy she had written. She said unhappily, "Isn't it just the calligraphy I wrote? It's not as good as Zhenren Zi Yuan's, and it can't be used as a plaque. What are you doing with it? Are you making fun of me?" Li Yundong said gently, "Silly girl, although Zhenren Zi Yuan's calligraphy is good and can be used to mount a plaque, it was chosen by everyone. In my heart, I like your calligraphy the most." Su-chan was stunned and looked at Li Yundong in confusion. "Why? My calligraphy is not as good as Zhenren Zi Yuan's?" Li Yundong laughed and scratched the tip of Su-chan's nose. "You're so stupid. Because these words were written by you, I like them the most. It's one thing to think who wrote the best, but it's another thing to like whose calligraphy is the most." Su-chan was very moved when she heard this. She looked at Li Yundong with tears in her eyes and said, "Yundong, you are so kind to me." As she said this, she fell into Li Yundong's arms, as if she wanted to melt into his body. Li Yundong held Su-chan in his arms and said with a smile, "Are you very touched?" Su-chan raised her head, wiped away her tears, and nodded vigorously. "Yes." Li Yundong spread out the palm of one hand. "Then give me back my ghost talisman, will you?" Su-chan suddenly smiled through her tears and struggled to get up from Li Yundong. "Well, it turns out that you want your ghost talisman." No, this is my family heirloom. I want to pass it down from generation to generation." Li Yundong hugged Su-chan and didn't let her run away. He scolded with a smile, "Stinky girl, how dare you go against me? I'll fight you to the death today." The two of them laughed for a while, and Li Yundong finally made Su-chan happy. When the two of them went downstairs together, the unhappiness in Su-chan's heart had disappeared. Li Yundong said to Zi Yuan and Xueqi, "Since the name of the shop has been decided, I think it's better for us to split up. We'll go to the shop, and we'll go to the Bureau of Industry and Commerce to register. What do you think?" Zi Yuan nodded and said, "Okay, let's do that." Xueqi took the initiative to volunteer. "Then I'll go to the Industry and Commerce Bureau. After all, I'm more familiar with it." Li Yundong smiled and said, "Even if you didn't say it, I would have let you go. There are so many people here, and you know these things the best. If you don't go, who will?" Xueqi pursed her lips and smiled. "Then I'll go in a while." Li Yundong nodded. "Okay, let's go to the shop later and discuss how to decorate it." After the discussion, Li Yundong, Zi Yuan, Ruan Hongling, and a large group of people from the Fox Zen School went to the pedestrian street in a mighty manner. Since the shop had been emptied, Li Yundong had already received the key after signing the rent contract yesterday. After entering the door, the group of people began to discuss how to decorate and design the shop. While they were discussing in full swing, a few people were looking at the shop from a distance on the pedestrian street. These people were all wearing ordinary clothes, but one of them was short and fat. It was the disciple of the Zhengyi school who had gone down the mountain with Zhang Tianhe and dragged the iron tower. The other was a beautiful young woman, Zhou Ping. Standing beside Zhou Ping was a tall and thin young man. Although his appearance was ordinary, he had an extraordinary bearing and his eyes were like lightning. The young man looked at the shop and chuckled. "Shimmy, is this the Zhenren Li who has repulsed all the major sects? He doesn't look like it. How high can his cultivation be if he hangs out with a bunch of vixens? I'm afraid he doesn't live up to his name, does he?" Zhou Ping snorted coldly. "Xixiang, although this guy is greedy and lustful, his cultivation and kung fu are not fake. Xixiang Huyen, don't you think so?" The disciple named Huyen said in a deep voice, "Shiji Zhou Ping is right. This person's cultivation can't be underestimated. Xixiang, you have to be careful." The young man still had a look of disbelief on his face. He sneered and said, "Rolling around in a pile of women all day long, no matter how powerful he is, there's definitely a limit. I'm afraid that even his Naiden is a fake one. Hey, Zhang Tianhe actually lost to such a guy. In a while, I will burst the myth of his first place." Previously, when Zi Yuan was known as the #1 expert of the younger generation in the cultivation world, almost all cultivators gave her some face. Even young people with great shintong didn't compete with her for the first place. First, they admired her beauty and temperament. Second, Zi Yuan's own strength was amazing. Third, even if they won, it would not be glorious. But now that the halo of first place had fallen on Li Yundong, countless young cultivators immediately became restless. This young man was none other than Zhang Tianhe's direct disciple. His name was Wang Lingfei, and he was Zhang Tianhe's Xixiang. His cultivation was not inferior to Zhang Tianhe's, but because Zhang Tianhe was Zhang Tianhe's son, Zhang Tianhe's status in the sect was far higher than his. Wang Lingfei had always looked down on his Xixiang. He had received all the benefits, learned all the good cultivation methods, and eaten all the elixirs, but in the end, his cultivation was not as good as Wang Lingfei's. When Wang Lingfei heard that Zhang Tianhe had been defeated by Li Yundong in one move, he gloated even more in his heart. He thought to himself, Zhang Tianhe was defeated in one move. If I can defeat Li Yundong, not only will I become famous in one battle, but I will also prove myself in front of the leader. Why not? Zhou Ping saw what he was thinking, and with a little encouragement, Wang Lingfei followed her. When Zhou Ping saw that Wang Lingfei was so arrogant that he even belittled Zhang Tianhe, whom she had a crush on, she was displeased. She curled the corner of her mouth and looked disapproving, but this expression only flashed and quickly disappeared from the corner of her mouth. She laughed and said, Xixiang, we will support you. The young man snorted. Why do I need you to support me? I can do it alone. Just as he was about to step forward, he suddenly saw 4 young men who looked like gangsters push open the door and enter the shop. The young man was stunned. Seeing that there were secular mortals inside, he stopped and wanted to wait for them to leave. After these young hoodlums entered the store, they were immediately stunned by the number of beautiful women in the store, and their saliva flowed 3 feet long. Li Yundong saw that these people had colorful heads and were dressed like hooligans. Their eyes were greedy and lustful, as if they wanted to swallow all the beautiful women in the room. He was secretly unhappy and shouted in a deep voice, Who are you? Li Yundong's shout, which contained the mantra Mahamudra, shocked the gangsters back to their senses. A yellow-haired gangster with a head like a chicken coop wiped the saliva from the corner of his mouth, put his hands on his hips, and said to Li Yundong arrogantly, Hey, who's the boss here? Li Yundong and Zi Yuan looked at each other, and Zi Yuan nodded. Li Yundong understood and cupped his hands. I am. What's the matter? The yellow-haired gangster shouted, It's nothing. I just want to tell you that you have to pay a monthly protection fee here in the future. When Li Yundong heard this, he didn't know whether to laugh or cry. What? Pay a monthly protection fee? Who do you think you are? Do you think this is the old society? Do you think this is Hong Kong? Do you think you're Wen Chong? The other people of the Fox Zen school also felt strange and thought to themselves, what a reckless thing. He actually tried to extort our leader. Do you want to die? Chapter 349. Go to watch net. Li Yundong couldn't help but raise his head and laugh. As soon as he laughed, the others of the Fox Zen school also laughed. Go to watch net. The 4 gangsters were confused by Li Yundong's laughter. They looked at each other, and one of the gangsters standing behind whispered, Boss, they don't look like ordinary people. Let's get out of here, shall we? The yellow-haired man felt uncomfortable by the laughter of Li Yundong and the others. He glared at his companion and said, Bullshit. Do you want me to spit out the money I've swallowed? When the man heard this, he shrank his head and stopped talking. Most of the gangsters had good eyesight, especially if they wanted to stay in the underworld for a long time. It didn't depend on whose fist was fiercer, but whose eyesight was better. Otherwise, no matter how good they were at fighting, they would either be caught or forced to run away in a few days. How could they survive? The yellow-haired man was obviously such a person. Seeing Li Yundong's extraordinary bearing and the beautiful women around him, he thought to himself, Damn it, this bastard actually asked me to step on a landmine. F***CK. However, he was reluctant to spit out the money he had swallowed. The yellow-haired man's heart skipped a beat. He glared at one of the men beside him and said in a low voice, You go and scare them. This man had a Mohican hairstyle. When he first entered the door, he had been arrogant, but now he saw that most of the people in Li Yundong's group were stunning beauties. When they saw him, not only did they not scream in fear, but they also laughed loudly. His laughter was full of contempt. He was not a fool. Naturally, he knew that he had provoked someone he couldn't afford to offend, so his momentum had weakened a little. At this time when he heard his big brother ask him to stand up for them, He was shocked and said with his eyes wide open, I will go? The yellow-haired man glared at him. Do I have to go by myself? Mohican said with a sad face. Big brother, why don't you go by yourself? The yellow-haired man said angrily. Nonsense, are you the big brother or am I the big brother? Mohican choked and said, Big brother, since you are the big brother, you should bear the burden for the younger brothers. The yellow-haired man glared at him fiercely. F***ck, if the big brother has to do everything by himself, then who will be the big brother? Do you still want to stay in this world? Mohican had no choice but to take a deep breath, pull out a brick from behind him, and shouted fiercely, Fuck you! Let me tell you, if you don't pay the protection fee on time every month, or else. Li Yundong didn't get angry. He looked at them with a smile and said, Otherwise what? Mohican swallowed his saliva and shouted, No matter what you do here in the future, don't even think about stopping. As soon as he finished speaking, Su Chan and the others giggled again, as if they had heard the funniest joke. Li Yundong chuckled and said, Who sent you here? Mohican was stunned and involuntarily looked at the yellow-haired man. The yellow-haired man kicked him angrily and scolded, I'm not afraid of you. Are you afraid of me? Mohican summoned up his courage again, glared at Li Yundong and shouted, It's none of your business. If you don't pay the protection fee, I'll smash your shop. Li Yundong laughed and said, Well, I'm just going to renovate it. Hurry up and smash it. If you smash it, I can save my wages. Mohican was dumbfounded. He had seen all kinds of people, including those who were shameless and arrogant, but he had never seen such a well-dressed man who was surrounded by beautiful women and was so unscrupulous. He unconsciously looked at the yellow-haired man again, and the yellow-haired man was frightened by his gaze. He thought to himself, In my impression, aren't rich people afraid of hooligans? Is it because there are so many beautiful women around that they have to be tough? Well, it's very likely. It seems that I have to do it myself. The yellow-haired man glared at Mohican and kicked him in the back. Then, he stood up and squinted at Li Yundong, looking him up and down as if he wanted to see through his heart. Li Yundong also looked him up and down. He saw that the gangster's appearance and temperament were very similar to Huang Bo in Crazy Stone. For a moment, he felt more and more funny in his heart. He smiled, as if the people standing in front of him were not a group of gangsters, but a group of comedians. The yellow-haired man looked at Li Yundong for a long time and felt that Li Yundong was not afraid of him. Instead, he was like a cat seeing a mouse, with a sense of ridicule. He knew in his heart that he must have met a master, but he also had the experience of kicking an iron plate. Seeing that he couldn't attack by force, he reached out to touch his back and sneered, Are you really not going to give it to me? Li Yundong had the experience of being shot by Zhao Yujian, so he was secretly vigilant, afraid that the man would pull out a gun from behind. He secretly ran his zhenqi, waiting for the man to really pull out a gun. Then, he would definitely strike first and kill him first. But after a while, Li Yundong saw the yellow-haired man suddenly pull out a black thing from behind him. He fixed his eyes on it and suddenly laughed. Su Chan, who was behind him, also giggled and said, Don't you have anything else? Why are you all using bricks? The yellow-haired man was also holding a brick in his hand, which was a little bigger than the one Mohican had used before. It seemed that since he was the big brother, the brick should also be a little bigger. Ruan Hongling sneered and said, These monsters, if they go out with some controlled knives, they will definitely be locked up if they are caught. They don't need to bring these bricks, because they are not controlled goods. Don't underestimate them. They are old gangsters. Li Yundong glanced at her and said with a smile, You know so well. Have you also been in a gang before? Ruan Hongling rolled her eyes at Li Yundong and said, You are the one who has been in a gang before. I can understand these things at a glance. Do you still need to be in a gang? The yellow-haired man saw the two of them talking and laughing happily, not taking him seriously at all. He was angry in his heart and shouted, Hey, do you think I am invisible? Li Yundong turned his face and pretended to be suddenly enlightened. He said, Sorry, I didn't notice and forgot about you. May I ask why you are here? The yellow-haired man was so angry that he gritted his teeth. He smiled grimly and said, You really won't give it to me? Li Yundong smiled and said, It seems that I'm not going to give it to you. The yellow-haired man pointed at Li Yundong and shouted, I'll ask you one last time. Are you going to give it to me or not? Li Yundong simply shook his head and said no. The yellow-haired man took a deep breath and said, well, then don't blame me for being ruthless. Li Yundong chuckled and looked at the yellow-haired man as if he was watching a monkey show. He wanted to see what the hell he was going to do. He saw the yellow-haired man take a deep breath. His eyes narrowed, and his chi sank into his dantian. Then, with a loud shout, he waved the brick in his hand and slapped it heavily on his face. With a loud bang, the yellow-haired man suddenly slapped himself so hard that his face was covered in blood. Li Yundong was stunned and his eyes widened. He thought to himself, F***CK, I've seen selfies, but I've never seen a selfie like this. Behind him, Su Chan and the others were so shocked that their eyes almost popped out. Su Chan said, is this guy crazy? The yellow-haired man's face was covered in blood, but he pointed at Li Yundong fiercely and said, You don't go. If you have the guts, don't go. You're dead. After that, he threw the brick on the ground, turned around, and pushed the door open. Then he stood at the door and howled loudly, shouting hysterically, I'm being beaten to death. Chinese people love to watch the fun. The yellow-haired man's howl immediately attracted a large group of people to watch, and many people pointed at him. Li Yundong winked at Zi Yuan and the others and also walked out. After a while, two men in urban management uniforms squeezed through the crowd and shouted, what happened? As soon as the yellow-haired man saw the urban management officers, he immediately felt as if he had seen a relative. Comrade police, you came at the right time. These people. The yellow-haired man turned around and pointed at Li Yundong. He gritted his teeth and said, as soon as we entered the shop, this man hit me with a brick like crazy. After that, he turned his head again and said to the urban management officers with a sad face, Comrade police, you have to uphold justice for us. Li Yundong saw that the yellow-haired man's face changed so quickly, which was really admirable. It was a waste of his talent not to act in movies. With him around, how could Comrade Huang Bo have a chance? After hearing this, the two urban management officers shouted at Li Yundong without saying a word. Hey, you, come with us. As they spoke, one of them took out handcuffs from his waist. Before Li Yundong could say anything, Ruan Hongling suddenly burst out laughing. She pointed at the two urban management officers with her hands on her hips and shouted, Hey, you two fakes. Can't you tell the difference between the skin of an urban management officer and that of a police officer? How can an urban management officer have handcuffs? Only the police can use them. Do you understand? The face of one of the urban management officers changed, and he glared at the man holding the handcuffs beside him. The man holding the handcuffs turned as red as a pig's liver. He put away the handcuffs resentfully and shouted at Ruan Hongling angrily, You beat people in the street. Come with us. The four gangsters also began to make a racket. The yellow-haired man, whose face was covered in blood, looked like he was about to die in the next second. Some of the onlookers saw that Li Yundong was dressed in bright clothes and was followed by a large group of beautiful women, so they subconsciously thought that he was a rich second generation. Their hearts were filled with hatred for the rich. In addition, these gangsters and the urban management had provoked them, so they also began to make noise. For a moment, the scene was chaotic and foul. Li Yundong remained calm and said to the two urban management officers, Ask them which brick I used to hit him with. The urban management officer glanced at the yellow-haired man, who had been on the verge of death just now. At this time, he suddenly had an idea. He pointed to the brick in the store and shouted, He hit me with this brick. There is still my blood on it. If you don't believe me, you can go and test it. The urban management officer shouted, Go and take out the brick. We want to have a blood test. Ruan Hongling sneered and said, You guys are really good at acting. Sure enough, 800 urban management officers destroy Dongying and 3,000 urban management officers conquer Taiwan. It's really domineering. Su Chan also said angrily to them, He obviously hurt himself. Why are you blaming us? As soon as she opened her mouth, the Fox Zen school immediately became noisy. There were so many beautiful women among them. With this shout, it was really a lively scene. There were more and more onlookers around. There were 3 layers inside and 3 layers outside. It was really a sea of people. Li Yundong raised his hand and stopped Su Chan and the others from making a racket. He smiled at Su Chan and said, Go and pick up the brick. Although Su-chan didn't understand, she still obediently answered and ran inside to pick up the brick. Li Yundong raised the brick high in front of everyone and said loudly, "Everyone, look carefully. This is the weapon they said I hurt him with." Ruan Hongling was shocked when she saw that Li Yundong had actually admitted that he had hurt the yellow-haired man. "Hey, are you crazy? It's obvious that he hurt himself." Zi Yuan also frowned slightly and said in a low voice, "Li Yundong, we cultivators shouldn't get involved in this kind of thing. It's very troublesome." Li Yundong smiled at them to show that he had a card up his sleeve. He said to the yellow-haired man, "Hey, look carefully. Is this the weapon I hurt you with?" Seeing that Li Yundong had actually admitted it, the yellow-haired man was overjoyed. Yes, it's this brick. Everyone, look, there is my blood on it." He was so excited that he jumped up, but before he could finish speaking, he realized that something was wrong. He quickly covered his wound and shouted, looking like he was dying. The two urban management officers shouted, "Since you have admitted it, the witness and the material evidence are all here. Come with us." Ruan Hongling sneered and said, "The urban management officers are so lenient. When did they start doing the work of the police?" One of the urban management officers glared at her and said, "If you say another word, I'll take you away too." Ruan Hongling had a bad temper. She also glared back and said, "Well, come and catch me." Li Yundong smiled and made a gesture to her, indicating that she should not speak. Then, he raised the solid blue brick high in front of everyone and said, "Everyone, look carefully. How could this brick hurt anyone?" After that, he rubbed his hands on the brick. No one could see how he moved, but suddenly, the brick seemed to be made of flour and turned into powder. Li Yundong's actions caused an uproar in the crowd. Wang Lingfei, Zhou Ping, and the others, who had been watching from the sidelines, suddenly gasped. Zhou Ping said in horror, "This person's Xueqi is really strong and condensed. He actually crushed such a blue brick into powder without batting an eyelid. No wonder Shidi could fight with him with heavenly thunder, but he was unharmed. Good kung fu. How terrifying." Wang Lingfei's face was also full of shock. He couldn't say a word, and there was fear in his eyes. Li Yundong had easily crushed the blue brick into powder. He clapped his hands, pointed at the yellow-haired man and the others, and shouted, "It's obvious that these people are blackmailing us." The eyes of everyone present immediately fell on the yellow-haired man and the others. All of them looked unfriendly and ready to make trouble. Chapter 350. Go to watch net. The onlookers didn't know that Li Yundong had used his powerful Xueqi to crush the blue brick into powder in an instant. They thought that the blue brick was really made of flour. Watch net. 7K. Oath M. Of course, the four gangsters knew that the brick was the real deal. It was terrifyingly hard, especially the yellow-haired gangster who had just patted himself. He stared at Li Yundong with bulging eyes, as if he had seen the devil. He thought to himself, "Oh my God, am I seeing a god?" This was clearly a brick that was as hard as steel. Why did it seem to have become tofu dregs in his hands? Could it be that he had switched them just now? No, impossible, I saw it with my own eyes. While he was thinking, the crowd around him began to clamor. Compared with the rich second generation, they hated this kind of blackmailer even more. They shouted one by one, "These people want to blackmail us. Arrest them." The two city enforcement officers saw that the situation was not good. Their legs trembled and they immediately wanted to escape. Ruan Hongling had sharp eyes. She pointed and shouted, "Catch these two imposters." The power of the people was great. Immediately, there were warm-hearted people blocking their way. The two city enforcement officers, who had been acting all high and mighty just a moment ago, instantly turned into a puddle of mud. The crotch of the one who had taken out the handcuffs earlier was now wet. The other three hoodlums were also scared out of their wits. Their faces were ashen, their legs were trembling, and their teeth were chattering. They covered their heads with their hands and squatted on the ground, fearing that they would be beaten to a pulp by the agitated crowd. When the crowd saw them like this, they became more and more enthusiastic. Some people even shouted, "Beat them to death. Don't let these scumbags go." The yellow-haired man was frightened. He was the boss, so he immediately reacted. He jumped up and knelt down in front of Li Yundong, crying bitterly. Boss, I had eyes but failed to recognize Mount Tai. I've offended you. Please do me a favor and just treat me as a fart. Let me go. Li Yundong snorted and said with a smile, "Didn't you say that I hit you?" The yellow-haired man quickly shook his head and said with a flattering smile, No, it's just a misunderstanding." As he spoke, he turned around and smiled at the crowd. "It's a misunderstanding. It's really a misunderstanding." After he finished speaking, he turned around and begged Su-chan and the others for mercy. "Beauties, please do me a favor and be merciful. You nobles like to be clean. It's not good to dirty your hands by hitting people like me. Beauties, grand aunts, I'll call you grand aunts, okay? If that's not possible, then I'll call you mom, right?" After the yellow-haired man said this, everyone burst into laughter. Ruan Hongling even blushed and stamped her feet, saying, "Bah, I'm still a virgin. I don't have a baby as old as you." Su-chan was kind by nature. When she saw the yellow-haired man say such extremely humble words, even the resentment in her heart dissipated. She pulled Li Yundong's hand and said softly, "Yundong, forget it. Let him go, okay?" Li Yundong glanced at Su-chan, smiled slightly, and patted her hand, indicating that he had an idea. He turned his head and said to the yellow-haired man, "The wound on your face really wasn't caused by me?" Seeing that there was a turning point, the yellow-haired man hurriedly said, "No, absolutely not. Who said that the wound on my face was caused by you? Is there a wound on my face?" He turned his head and looked at his three companions. "Do you see a wound on my face?" The three gangsters were not fools, so they quickly shook their heads like a rattle drum. The yellow-haired man immediately turned to Li Yundong and said with a flattering smile, "Look, they all said that there was no wound on my face." Li Yundong pointed at the blood on his face and said with a smile, "Then what's with the blood on your face?" The yellow-haired man touched his face with his hand and said loudly in surprise, "Is this blood?" "No way, this is sweat, yes, sweat, ha ha ha, it's a face full of sweat." After that, he turned his head to look at his three companions. "Hey, is my face full of sweat?" The three gangsters had strange expressions on their faces, as if they wanted to laugh but didn't dare to. They could only force themselves to nod. However, the people around them all laughed wildly. Li Yundong also laughed and said, "Your face is full of blood and sweat? Do you think you're a Fergana horse?" As soon as Li Yundong finished speaking, the others laughed even harder. Su-chan even squatted on the ground with her hands covering her stomach. Zi Yuan also couldn't help laughing. The yellow-haired man was embarrassed by everyone's laughter. He said with a flattering smile, Yes, I am a Fergana horse. Please be merciful and let me go. In the future, I will serve you." Li Yundong waved his hand and said with a smile, "Forget it. I don't have such luck. Let's go. Be careful in the future." When the yellow-haired man heard this, he was overjoyed and hurriedly said, "My lord, you are really generous. You will definitely be rich in the future." Li Yundong listened with a smile. He waved his hand and said, "Hurry up and go before I change my mind." The yellow-haired man didn't dare to stay any longer. He beckoned to his three companions and quickly got into the crowd. The remaining two urban management officers also rolled their eyes, lowered their heads, and got into the crowd, disappearing without a trace. Seeing that everyone had run away, Ruan Hongling rushed up to Li Yundong and stamped her feet. "Why did you let them go? If we don't teach them a lesson, everyone will think that we are easy to bully in the future and come looking for trouble with us." Li Yundong said with a smile, "As soon as these people came in, I realized that they were deliberately looking for trouble. Although I have a lot of grudges, there are only a few people in the secular world who have grudges with me. If I don't let them go, how can I find out who the mastermind is? These people are just being used by others. Judging from their usual arrogant and haughty attitude, they will definitely go back to find trouble with the instigator after suffering such a big loss today. When that time comes, won't it be fine for them to just follow behind them?" Only then did Ruan Hongling's anger turn into joy. She gave Li Yundong a thumbs up and said, "You are really smart. You are full of evil tricks." Li Yundong laughed and scolded, "Hey, are you praising me or scolding me?" At this time, the crowd saw that Li Yundong, as the owner of the matter, had calmed down. Naturally, There was no reason for the onlookers to surround them. Some people said, "Hey, it's all right. Let's go. The show is over." Some curious people saw that there were so many beautiful women in this shop, so they came forward to ask what kind of shop it was. Ruan Hongling took the opportunity to promote the brand of Desanxian. She had a red mouth and white teeth, a clear and melodious voice, and an extremely beautiful appearance. In a short while, she had fooled a large group of people, but they were confused and thought to themselves, "This shop is going to open. I have to come and have a look. Even if I don't drink tea, it's good to see beautiful women." At this time, Li Yundong said to Su Chan and said, "Let's go and catch up with them and see who the mastermind behind these gangsters is." Su Chan responded and followed Li Yundong excitedly. The two of them were far behind the yellow-haired man and the others. The yellow-haired gangsters had no idea that they had not only kicked a hard iron plate, but also been trailed by others. The yellow-haired man didn't take long to come to an intersection. He met a man in a suit and two beautiful women. As soon as he saw the man, he rushed up aggressively and shouted loudly. His three men also surrounded the man. Li Yundong looked from a distance and was stunned. He whispered, "It's him?" Su Chan also looked and saw that the man was Zhao Yuzhen, who had sat in their seats in the mall before. Su Chan also asked curiously, "Does this guy have a grudge against us?" Li Yundong smiled and said, "He doesn't have a grudge against you, but he does have a grudge against me. Humph, he played dirty behind my back. Well, I'll pay him back later. I'll make him afraid when he sees me in the future." From a distance, the two of them saw the yellow-haired man and the other surrounding Zhao Yuzhen and roaring loudly, threatening and intimidating him. Li Yundong could hear them clearly from a distance. F***CK, how dare you set me up? I've kicked an iron plate. Do you see the flowers on my face? If you don't pay for my medical expenses and mental damage today, I'll cut you into pieces today. Zhao Yuzhen was so scared that he was trembling like a sieve. The two beautiful women beside him were also scared out of their wits, and their bodies almost fell to the ground. Not long after, Zhao Yuzhen took out a wallet from his arms, took out a stack of money from it, and handed it over with trembling hands. "Here you are. It's all here." The yellow-haired man grabbed the money and his wallet, taking out the rest of the money. His three companions also searched Zhao Yogan's pockets, took off his gold ring and watch, and put them in their pockets. Seeing that his three lackeys really couldn't find anything, the yellow-haired man sneered at Zhao Yuzhen and scolded, "F***CK, be smarter next time. There are some people I can't afford to offend, but I can still afford to offend people like you." After that, he left with his three lackeys. Zhao Yuzhen waited until they were far away before he straightened up, his face cloudy. The two women next to him wanted to help him, but Zhao Yuzhen slapped them in the face and shouted, "F***CK, I was threatened just now but you didn't help me." The woman who had been slapped happened to be the pointy-faced beauty who had been slapped last time. She turned her face away and covered her face with one hand. The resentful look in her eyes was chilling, but when she turned her face away, she was smiling apologetically. The other beauty said with a hollow smile, "Boss Zhao, weren't we afraid just now?" Zhao Yuzhen scolded, "Afraid? Why should I be afraid of you? Why should I pay for you?" The pointy-faced beauty who had been slapped whispered, "Boss Zhao, we're not bodyguards." Zhao Yuzhen was so angry that he raised his foot and wanted to kick her. The other beauty next to him quickly stopped him. "Hey, Boss Zhao, calm down, calm down. Hurry up and call the police." "We'll call the police. There are so many people here. It won't be good if they see you hit a woman." Zhao Yuzhen raised his hand and slapped her again. "I hit a woman. What are you going to do?" The woman covered her red face and didn't dare to make a sound. Zhao Yuzhen roared like a madman for a while. When he was a little tired, he cursed and left. The other two beauties looked at each other and slowly followed him. Seeing the three of them leave, Su Chan looked at Li Yundong and asked, "Yundong, shouldn't we go up and teach this guy a lesson? This guy is so hateful." Li Yundong snorted and said with a sneer, "I really wanted to teach him a lesson, but now it seems that there's no need. If I hit this kind of person, it will dirty my hands and feet. Don't worry, someone will help me deal with him." Su Chan was stunned, but she quickly reacted. "Ah, you mean the two women beside him?" Li Yundong laughed and said, "Yes, Didn't you see the look in that woman's eyes just now? I can feel the hatred and resentment in her eyes even from so far away. Just watch. People like Zhao Yuzhen will definitely get their retribution, and it will definitely be on these two women. Su Chan nodded hard. This kind of person is too hateful. Li Yundong patted the girl on the shoulder and said, "Let's go back." Just as Li Yundong and Su Chan chased after them, Zhou Ping and the others saw that the crowd had dispersed, and Wang Lingfei had been shocked by Li Yundong's move. For a moment, he didn't dare to act rashly. She sneered in her heart and felt a little disdainful of Wang Lingfei's stage fright. She said, "Let's go. Come back another day?" Wang Lingfei was eager to do so he snorted and said, "I still have 2 powerful magical weapons to refine. When I'm done, I'll come back to make trouble for this guy." They turned around and were about to leave when they suddenly heard an elegant and quiet voice. "Fellow Taoists of the Xueqi school, you've been watching here for a long time. What's the matter?" Zhou Ping and the others were shocked and turned around vigilantly. They fixed their eyes on the source of the voice and saw a beautiful woman in a white dress standing in front of them. It was Zi Yuan. Chapter 351. Go to Watch Net. When Zhou Ping and the others saw Zi Yuan, they immediately reached into their arms and grabbed their powerful magical weapons. They glared at her fiercely, and their bodies were covered with Xueqi. Watch Net. Wang Lingfei also looked at Zi Yuan, and his eyes shone brightly. He said slowly, "Zhenren Zi Yuan really deserves her reputation. She is indeed an immortal, and I admire her." Zi Yuan glanced at him indifferently, smiled slightly, and said, "This fellow Taoist must be Wang Lingfei, who is known as Zhenren Yuchuan?" Wang Lingfei smiled and said, "I wouldn't dare. I rarely go down the mountain. Has Zhenren Zi Yuan heard of my name?" Zi Yuan smiled faintly and said, "In the Xueqi school, it is rumored that there are only 2 disciples of the younger generation who can be considered masters. One is Zhang Tianhe, and the other is Wang Lingfei. Since perfected Yuchuan is so famous, how could I not know him?" Wang Lingfei thought highly of himself. When he was praised by Zi Yuan, he suddenly felt a little complacent. He snorted and said, "You flatter me. Zhenren Zi Yuan is also a pillar of the Linggong sect. Why did you collude with the people of the Fox Zen school?" Zhou Ping also sneered and said, "Zi Yuan, you have to think it through. This is the last time I remind you not to get involved with the people of the Fox Zen school. Otherwise, our Xueqi school will regard you as traitors." At this time, Ruan Hongling also came over. She sneered and retorted without showing any weakness, "Do you think we are traitors? How arrogant! Who do you think you are? Is it the Taoist master of Xueqi school?" As soon as Zhou Ping saw Ruan Hongling, her eyes lit up. She gritted her teeth and said, "It's you again. Don't think that you can be proud just because you have a sharp tongue." Ruan Hongling interrupted. "What about me? I, Ruan Hongling, have never relied on my eloquence to speak, but on reasoning. Every time I make you speechless, it's because you're pestering me endlessly. It's unreasonable. If you're right, do you think I can win against you even if I have 100 mouths?" Zhou Ping was so angry that she said angrily, "Why am I unreasonable? How is that reasonable? Don't tell me you're in the right because you're hanging out with this kind of evil people? This is preposterous." Ruan Hongling snorted. "Evil? I used to think that the Fox Zen school was evil, but after getting along with them these days, I feel that they are no different from ordinary people. They are even much cuter than most people in this world. On the contrary, some so-called fellow disciples are aggressive and want to drive the Spirit Palace sect to a dead end. In my opinion, you guys are the real evil and crooked." His words were really like a javelin and a dagger. Zhou Ping was so angry that her face turned pale and her lips trembled. The expressions of Wang Lingfei and the other disciple of the Xueqi school also changed drastically. Hearing this, Zi Yuan was also shocked. She shouted, "Hongling, don't talk nonsense." Ruan Hongling had been holding back her anger for a long time. She shouted at Zi Yuan, "Sister Zi Yuan, why are you still so polite to them? Wherever we retreat, they chase after us. Do you think they're here to invite us back? Is there really a solution to this?" Ruan Hongling raised her eyebrows and shouted at Zhou Ping and the others, "Since you guys are so capable, If you have the guts to make a move here, I will consider that you are really overbearing. If you don't have the ability, get out of here. I can't bear to see bastards like you. Xueqi was extremely angry. She glared at her. An ray of light shot out of her eyes like lightning. Do you think I don't dare? Wang Lingfei also scolded. Who do you think you are? How dare you talk like this? After that, he stepped forward and grabbed Wan Hongling's shoulder, wanting to teach her a lesson. But as soon as Wang Lingfei moved, Zi Yuan shouted, "Stop!" Zi Yuan turned her wrist and put her 5 fingers on Wang Lingfei's wrist. Xueqi and the stout disciple next to her shouted at the same time, and the two of them attacked Zi Yuan's vital parts. Xueqi's 5 fingers were like hooks, and her fingers were in the shape of an eagle's claw. Once someone was caught by her fingers, not only would their meridians be restricted, but their wrists might also be broken. The other stout disciple took a step forward, with one hand pulled back in front of his chest and his palm facing the sky, as if he was holding an invisible iron tower, ready to attack. His other hand was clenched, a bit like a tiger's claw. As long as it touched the body, it could take away a large piece of flesh. But at a closer look, it was a bit like a crane's beak. When the 5 fingers gathered, a gentle peck could hit the vital acupoints of the human body and hurt the enemy invisibly. Zi Yuan frowned. She knew that if she could save Wan Hongling, she wouldn't be able to protect herself. If she could protect herself, she wouldn't be able to save Wan Hongling. Just as she was in a dilemma, she suddenly heard a familiar voice coming from the side. Are you bullying me with more people? After that, she saw a left hand twisting in. This arm was like a fierce dragon crossing the river, overturning the rivers and seas. The big arm leaned against Xueqing's finger, and Xueqing suddenly felt a majestic and vigorous Xueqi rush over like a tsunami. She was so shocked that she immediately withdrew. The stout disciple of the Xueqi school took a deep breath, and his whole body swelled up like a balloon. Instead of retreating, his hands went up to meet the attack. On the other side, Wang Lingfei saw a figure suddenly appear between them. This person's right hand made a lotus fist, and his index finger was raised, with the upper joint slightly bent like a hook. At the same time, this person shouted, "Bang!" It was the Buddha's handprint of eliminating obstacles. Wang Lingfei saw that the other party had arrived first. If he retreated, not only would he weaken his momentum, but he might also be injured by the other party, so he simply threw a punch at him. This exchange was so fast that Zi Yuan could only see a series of afterimages flashing by. Then, she heard a few puff-puff sounds, and Xueqing flew back. Wang Lingfei and the Mahamudra collided head-on, and his face suddenly turned blood red, as if blood was about to drip out. He stood there motionlessly, not saying a word. The stout disciple of the Xueqi school did not say a word. His body flew backward and hit the wall on the street, causing the passers-by to cry out in alarm and look at them in unison. At this time, Zi Yuan found that it was Li Yundong standing in front of her. The boy's back was like an iron tower, motionless and standing proudly, as if no matter how big the wind and waves in front of him were, they could not knock him down. Li Yundong stood tall among them, and there was a faint white steam rising from the top of his head. One of his hands was maintaining the shape of the Buddha's handprint of eliminating obstacles, while the other arm had a few holes. It was obvious that the stout disciple of the Xueqi school had only scratched Li Yundong's clothes before he had been sent flying. Zi Yuan knew that Li Yundong's Xueqi was extremely dense and condensed, and she had suddenly intervened, causing the 3 people of the Xueqi school to suffer a great loss. Wang Lingfei stood where he was, his face turning from red to white, and then from white to red. After repeating this several times, he let out a long breath and looked at Li Yundong with surprise and doubt in his eyes. Who are you? Who is your master? Li Yundong snorted coldly. It's none of your business. Wang Lingfei said in shock. I see that you have the Xueqi Kung Fu of the Xianmen sect. Why are you going against our Xueqi school? After Xueqing helped up the Shirdi who had been sent flying by Li Yundong, she didn't wait for Li Yundong to speak and shouted, This is Li Yundong, who has abandoned himself to associate with the Fox Zen school and forced himself to stand out. Wang Lingfei was shocked again. He took a step back and looked Li Yundong up and down seriously. With a solemn expression he said, Are you Li Yundong? Li Yundong cupped his fists and said, Yes, what can I do for you? Wang Lingfei took a deep breath, narrowed his eyes and said, My Shirdi Zhang Tianhe was defeated by you. I heard that you have practiced the heavenly Jindan technique. Is that true? Li Yundong hadn't expected to encounter such a thing when he came back. When he heard the other party ask about the whereabouts of the heavenly Jindan technique, he was shocked and unhappy. He snorted and asked instead of answering, "What? Are you here to fight for him? Well, do you want to fight me one by one or together?" Wang Lingfei hadn't expected that Li Yundong would be even more arrogant than he was. He was so agitated by Li Yundong that he forgot to ask about the whereabouts of the heavenly Jindan technique. He snorted and said, "It said that Zhenren Li is unruly and unrestrained. Seeing you today, you really live up to your reputation." The corner of Li Yundong's mouth twitched and he sneered. "I've also heard that the Xueqi school is overbearing and aggressive. Seeing you today, it's really not as good as seeing you in person." Seeing that Li Yundong was also a sharp-tongued person, Wang Lingfei's expression changed and he shouted, "Li Yundong, don't be complacent. We, the Xueqi school, can crush a small fox Zen school to death." Li Yundong laughed and said, "I'm afraid of everything. I'm afraid of heaven, earth, and my wife, but I'm not afraid of threats. Are you threatening me?" At this time, the disciples of the Fox Zen school also gathered around. Although there weren't many of them, they were much more than Zhou Ping and the other two. Moreover, they were all beautiful, and they could attract countless eyes just by standing on the street. For a moment, the crowd surrounded them again. Zhou Ping looked around and whispered to Wang Lingfei, "Xixiang, a wise man knows better than to fight when the odds are against him. Let's go first. We will get revenge sooner or later." Wang Lingfei had seen Li Yundong's palms crush the blue bricks like flour. In the fight just now, he had also been knocked out of breath by Li Yundong's powerful Xueqi and couldn't speak. However, Li Yundong had spoken freely without any hindrance. Not to mention anything else, the difference in Xueqi cultivation was obvious. Wang Lingfei was well aware of this. He knew that if he fought with this person in front of him, if he didn't have a powerful magical weapon, he would most likely lose. He thought to himself, "My two powerful magical weapons will take another month to refine. Why should I fight with this person?" Wang Lingfei also wanted to leave, so he nodded. Zhou Ping looked at Li Yundong with a sneer and said, "Li Yundong, I know that your cultivation is good, but no matter how powerful you are, you can't be invincible in the world. Can you resist the siege of all the cultivation sects in the world?" Li Yundong said proudly, "I, Li Yundong, have never relied on my fists. I rely on my own righteousness and stability. As the saying goes, a righteous person is not afraid of a crooked shadow. I don't believe that all the cultivation sects in the world will use their power to avenge their personal grievances and be aggressive like you." Zhou Ping gritted her teeth and said, Okay. She then looked at Zi Yuan and said, "Zi Yuan, have you made up your mind to go against our Xueqi school? Do you want to be the great traitor of our Xueqi school in the past 1,000 years? This accusation was really scary. Zi Yuan's body trembled slightly, but she quickly said indifferently, "I still have the same words. I, Zi Yuan, only exist for cultivation. I don't need others to tell me what to do or what to say. Whether I am a traitor or not, the cultivation world has its own justice. It can't be decided by one or two people's empty words. Even if the cultivation world thinks that I am a traitor now, I believe that it will naturally give me justice after 1,000 years." Ruan Hongling also said angrily, "Sister Zi Yuan, what's there to say to her?" Zhou Ping laughed and said, "Mystical Silver Fox said the same thing at the beginning, but what about now? More than 1,000 years have passed. Isn't she still notorious? Zi Yuan, let me tell you, what stinks is stinks. It will never become fragrant." As she said this, she glared at Li Yundong fiercely. Just like the Fox Zen school, evildoers will always be evildoers. They haven't changed for 1,000 years, and they won't change in the future. Li Yundong was furious. He took a step forward and shouted, "Do you want to die?" Chapter 352. Go to watch net. This loud shout really shook the glass of the surrounding shops. Many onlookers on the street only felt a buzzing sound in their ears, as if someone had hit their eardrums with chopsticks. The pain made them unable to hear the rest of their words, and they could only cover their ears with their hands. Go to watch net. Zhou Ping and the others were also shocked by Li Yundong's shout, and the zhenqi in their bodies became chaotic. She couldn't help but feel a burst of fear in her heart. She looked at Li Yundong with hatred and shouted, "Let's go!" At this time, they were in a busy market, so she was not afraid of Li Yundong's sneak attack. After saying that, she turned around and left with her Shurdi. Before Wang Lingfei left, he looked at Li Yundong coldly and then at Zi Yuan. Suddenly he sneered and said, "Zhenren Zi Yuan, Zhenren Li, don't be cowards at the Taoist assembly in a while." After that, he laughed and raised his head to leave. Ruan Hongling looked at their departing figures and spat fiercely. "What the hell? Using a chicken feather as a token of authority. Do you really think you're the leader of the Zhengyi school?" Li Yundong's face was as dark as water. He turned his head and saw Zi Yuan frowning slightly. Her eyes were confused, as if she was thinking about something. Li Yundong asked, "Zi Yuan, what is the Taoist assembly?" Zi Yuan came to her senses. Her eyes narrowed, she thought for a moment, and said, "It's not convenient to talk here. Let's go back and talk." Li Yundong looked around and saw that the pedestrian street was surrounded by layers of people. Some policemen and urban management officers had come out to maintain order. He nodded and said, "Well, let's go back and talk." The group of people had come out happily, but in the end, they went back angrily. As soon as they entered the house, everyone started cursing. Ruan Hongling was full of anger, but so were the people of the Fox Zen school. The little foxes felt that they had never done a bad thing in their lives. Why did these people just not allow them to exist in the world? Some people wore human skin, but they did things that were worse than beasts. In the end, they shouted and killed strange races like them, saying that they were evildoers who couldn't exist in this world, or else it would be treason and heresy. What kind of logic was that? Li Yundong saw them cursing together, but he didn't stop them. He just nodded to Zi Yuan. Zi Yuan understood, and the two of them went to a room. Li Yundong said, "Zi Yuan, what's going on with the Taoist assembly? I heard what that person said just now. It seems like we are going to? Why can't I go?" Zi Yuan sighed softly and said, "It's a long story." Li Yundong chuckled. "It's okay. Take your time. Do you want a cup of tea?" Zi Yuan smiled slightly. During the northern and southern dynasties of the Jin dynasty, both Buddhism and Taoism flourished at the same time. In particular, all the scholars of the Jin dynasty studied Buddhism, Taoism, and Confucianism. Because if one of these three schools of learning was not good enough, they would not be able to get a good grade in the evaluation, and thus would not be able to get the opportunity to become an official. Throughout the history of China, Buddhism and Taoism had never been as prosperous and powerful at the same time as they were during that period. During the period of the northern and southern dynasties, Emperor Liang founded the first grand gathering of Buddhists. The Annals of Emperor Liang states that Emperor Liang came to Tongtai Temple and set up an open meeting. In the Tang dynasty, Xuanzang came back from the west to fetch scriptures. He also recorded in the records of the western regions of the Tang dynasty that an open meeting would be held in ancient India every 5 years. Li Yundong asked in confusion, "What is an open meeting?" Zi Yuan explained, "The open meeting refers to a kind of big meeting held by Buddhism to build up good karma. It is a meeting where everyone is treated equally, regardless of whether they are noble or lowly, monks or laymen, wise or foolish, good or evil." Li Yundong asked again, "What does that have to do with the Taoist assembly?" Zi Yuan smiled and said, "As I said just now, during the period of the northern and southern dynasties of the Jin dynasty, Buddhism and Taoism flourished at the same time. But in the Tang dynasty, especially when Emperor Taizong respected Buddhism, he held an open meeting every 5 years. The power of Buddhism often gathered, so Taoism was naturally excluded and declined. But at that time, the Taoist sects were unwilling to retreat to the second line. They saw that Buddhism held an open meeting every 5 years, so the great Taoist Zhenren Luo Gongyuan took the initiative to contact the great Taoist masters at that time, Zhonggua and Yi Fashion, and began to hold the quadrennial Taoist assembly. Li Yundong listened attentively. And then, Zi Yuan said, later, after the Taoist assembly was held several times, it gradually became famous and reached the ears of Emperor Xuanzong of Tang. Emperor Xuanzong of Tang was curious, so he summoned Luo Gongyuan and asked him to fight with Vajra Sanzang in front of the main hall of the imperial court. In the end, Luo Gongyuan won. From then on, Emperor Xuanzong of Tang changed his faith and began to worship Taoism. He asked Luo Gongyuan for advice on Taoist magic. Li Yundong understood a little and said, "I understand. From then on, there was a feud between Buddhism and Taoism? Zi Yuan nodded and said, yes, the Taoist assembly became famous from then on. All the Taoist sects were proud to be able to participate in the Taoist assembly. Those who can participate in the Taoist assembly are all top-notch sects in the cultivation world. Even if you lose to others, others will still look up to you. But if you can't participate, others won't even look at you in the eye. Li Yundong sneered and said, why should I care what they think of me? Zi Yuan shook her head and advised, Li Yundong, you can't say that. Although we often call ourselves Taoists, in fact, we are Taoists. Taoism pays attention to inaction and non-competition, while Taoism pays attention to the struggle between man and heaven. The process of a person's cultivation is the process of constantly fighting against himself and heaven. Therefore, our Taoist sect seems to be peaceful, but in fact, it is the most fierce and heaven-defying sect. Now that you have taken over the Fox Zen school, I believe you can also feel it. If you don't fight, you will starve to death in less than a month. If you want to open a tea shop, you will naturally have competitors. In the face of your opponents, how can you not fight? If you don't fight, you will have no money. If you don't have money, you will starve. If you starve, you won't be able to cultivate. If you can't cultivate, your sect will weaken and you will be bullied. Hearing this, Li Yundong sighed and said, yes, how can I cultivate if I have to endure this kind of humiliation all day long? Zi Yuan continued, there is also an advantage to participating in this kind of Taoist assembly. That is, it can let all the cultivation sects in the world know you and know your prestige, so they don't dare to offend you again. And most importantly, the organizer of each Taoist assembly will take out a magical item as a prize to attract experts from all sects to participate in the assembly. Speaking of this, Zi Yuan suddenly asked Li Yundong, by the way, guess who will be in charge of this Taoist assembly? Li Yundong asked curiously, isn't it the Xueqi school? Zi Yuan shook her head and said, no, the Taoist assembly has evolved into a meeting for various sects to show their strength and attract followers. The Xueqi school is already strong enough, so they don't need to use this kind of meeting to prove their strength. Li Yundong pondered and said, which sect could it be? Zi Yuan's eyes flickered and she said meaningfully, it's the Gazao sect of external alchemy. Li Yundong's heart skipped a beat. Gazao sect? The Gazao sect that refined Renyuan Jindan? Zi Yuan nodded and said yes. Do you remember that we once said that there was a mastermind in the cultivation world planning a conspiracy? Li Yundong's expression was solemn. Yes, especially since the bodies of the two golden snakes were stolen and Zhang Sun Hong's mysterious death. I vaguely feel that there seems to be some connection between these things. Zi Yuan said, I think so too. Just now, when Wang Lingfei mentioned the Taoist assembly, I suddenly remembered that the dead golden snake had mentioned that the immortal pen and the medicine king tripod were about to appear. I couldn't help but think, the Gazao sect has always been low-key. Why did they take the initiative to host the Taoist assembly this time? And why did Wan Zhenyuan, the master of the Gazao sect, announce in such a high profile that he had refined Renyuan Jindan and then caused the Jindan to be stolen? Li Yundong's expression turned cold. Do you suspect that this has something to do with the Gazao sect? Zi Yuan nodded and said, yes, I even suspect that the magical item of this Taoist assembly is either the immortal pen or the medicine king tripod. Li Yundong said, I don't know what the immortal pen does, but you said before that the medicine king tripod is a magical item used to refine Dun Jindan, right? Since the Gazao sect is an external alchemy sect, how could they be willing to give it to others? Zi Yuan sneered and said, so, if the magical item taken out by the Gazao sect is the medicine king tripod, there must be a shocking conspiracy behind it. They even dared to give away the magical item used to refine Dun Jindan. This is equivalent to asking for the lifeblood of the external alchemy sect. Since they are so willing to give it away, they must be asking for something big. As she said this, she looked at Li Yundong with bright eyes and said, moreover, since ancient times, the refinement of Renyuan Jindan has never been limited to one. Li Yundong was shocked. He widened his eyes and looked at Zi Yuan. You mean, there are other Renyuan Jindan in the world? Li Yundong had never seen the magical power of the immortal pen and the medicine king tripod, so he didn't have too many feelings or greed for them. However, Li Yundong had a deep feeling about Renyuan Jindan. If he didn't have Renyuan Jindan, he would still be an ordinary otaku at home. How could he be like this? Li Yundong thought to himself, although my cultivation has reached a very high level and I don't need the help of Renyuan Jindan, Su Chan and Zhou Qin need it. If they can also take a Renyuan Jindan, their cultivation will definitely advance by leaps and bounds in the future. In particular, the Renyuan Jindan he had taken had originally belonged to Su Chan. He had mistakenly taken her Jindan, which had caused her cultivation to stagnate. This had always made Li Yundong feel guilty. If he could get another Renyuan Jindan, he would be able to compensate the little girl. Li Yundong's heart skipped a beat, but he quickly thought about it and couldn't help shaking his head. No, even if several Renyuan Jindan were refined at the same time, the person who obtained the Jindan would have taken it himself long ago. How could he have kept it until now? Seeing that he was tempted, Zi Yuan knew what he was thinking in the blink of an eye. She said, although the Renyuan Jindan may have been taken by someone, since the Renyuan Jindan has appeared, the Medicine King tripod must have also appeared. We just don't know its whereabouts. However, according to the current situation, it is very likely to be in the hands of Wang Zhenyuan, the leader of the Gazao sect. Since the Medicine King tripod is still in the world, have you ever thought that if you get it, you can refine the elixir of life by yourself in the future? Li Yundong was shocked. Refine it by myself? Chapter 353. Go to watch net. When Li Yundong heard what Zi Yuan said, he was extremely surprised. In his eyes, Zi Yuan had always been an elegant and modest fairy who stood aloof from worldly affairs. But suddenly she said such a thing, which was simply encouraging him to snatch the Medicine King tripod, an extremely hot powerful magical weapon. Whether he could snatch it or not was another matter, but even if he did, he would definitely become enemies with all the outer sects in the world. Li Yundong looked at Zi Yuan in surprise and said, "Didn't you say that you shouldn't let me have too deep of a grudge, so that I wouldn't be able to do anything in the future?" Zi Yuan's expression was surprisingly serious. She said, "Extraordinary times call for extraordinary things. I vaguely feel that something big is going to happen in the cultivation world. Under such great changes, if our cultivation is not strong enough, it is very likely that our bodies and souls will be destroyed." Zi Yuan fixed her eyes on Li Yundong. She sighed softly and said, "Since the Battle of Mount Tianlong, I have seen that you have been busy with worldly affairs every day and have had no time to cultivate. Although your cultivation is still strong, you and I both know that your cultivation quotient has hardly improved. Otherwise, with your strength, you should have reached the advanced realm of the sixth heaven long ago, and been able to cultivate your Yin spirit into Yang spirit." Ever since Li Yundong had become famous after the Battle of Mount Tianlong and defeated Zi Yuan had never given him any guidance in cultivation. At this time, Li Yundong suddenly looked embarrassed when he heard Zi Yuan's words. "Go to watch net." Zi Yuan continued, "I know that as the leader of a sect, you have to worry about the livelihood of so many people. It's difficult for you to cultivate if you are trapped in the secular world, so I suggest that you find another way. Otherwise, if you continue to cultivate at your current speed, you won't be able to reach the Yuanying phase in 100 years. These words aroused the pride in Li Yundong's heart. He thought to himself, "You have reached the Yuanying phase at the age of 20. Can't I reach the Yuanying phase at the age of 120? How dare you? There should be a limit to looking down on others. Tonight, I will cultivate to the Yuanying phase for you to see." Li Yundong had been busy making a living these days, so he had indeed lost the drive he had when he was going through the heavenly tribulation. At this time, he had been provoked by Zi Yuan and made up his mind. His temperament and momentum had changed. Li Yundong didn't intend to say any heroic words to her. He just wanted to go back to his room and start cultivating. He wanted to prove it to her with his actions. Zi Yuan was smart and naturally noticed the change in Li Yundong. She laughed in her heart, but her face didn't change. She still said, "I've already said everything. You can decide whether to go to the Taoist assembly or not. You can also decide whether to snatch the Medicine King tripod or not. I'll go back to my room first." Li Yundong watched her walk out of the door and thought for a while in the room alone. Not long after, Zhou Qin came back with the business license that had been approved. Li Yundong called her into the room and asked her a few questions about the license. Then he asked her to tell Su Chan and the others not to disturb him later. He wanted to meditate and cultivate. After Zhou Qin left, Li Yundong sat cross-legged on the bed. Not long after, the zhenqi in his body slowly flowed out of his 2 kidneys, like a warm current flowing through his whole body. After a while, he entered a deep meditative state and transformed into his original god spirit in his spirit space. Li Yunyang controlled his 3-headed and 6-armed god to go up to the sky and down to the ground in his spirit space. He could make it become whatever he wanted. He had really reached the great freedom realm of God manifestation and changing at will. But after Li Yundong operated like this for a while, he suddenly thought, why can't I change my Yin spirit into the shape of 3 heads and 6 arms? Thinking of this, Li Yundong quickly condensed his zhenqi into the niden of the lower dantian in his lower abdomen. It didn't take long for his Yin spirit to jump out. But after jumping out, Li Yundong looked at himself and found that there was no change at all. Not only did his Yin spirit not grow stronger, but there were faint signs of regression. Li Yundong's heart trembled. He tried to use his mind to control the appearance of his Yin spirit, but after trying for a while, he found that his Yin spirit had not changed at all. For a moment, Li Yundong couldn't help but fall into deep thought. Why can the God spirit of my spirit space change at will, but my Yin spirit can't change at will? Li Yundong thought about the various Buddhist and Taoist classics he had read one by one. He suddenly remembered the poem of the 8th phase of the heavenly Jindan technique he had read. It had once said, the 8th phase of the heavenly Jindan technique is in the lower regions, and the Zhou embryonic breath nurtures the baby. Sometimes the fire burns the elixir cave and goes deep into the cold spring to play with the red turtle. Thinking of this, Li Yundong suddenly had an idea. He thought to himself, when I practiced the heavenly Jindan technique before, I woke up naturally when I reached the 8th phase. I didn't completely finish the 8th phase. Why don't I try to completely finish the 8th phase today? Thinking of this, Li Yundong took back his Yin spirit. He thought again before when my Yin spirit left my body. It was the zhenqi of the 5 internal organs that drove my Yin spirit out of my body. That is to say, my Yin spirit qi came from my heart, liver, spleen, lungs, and kidneys. In fact, this is not in line with the key of the heavenly Jindan technique. Because the heavenly Jindan technique starts with cultivating qi of courage. Through cultivating qi of courage, the kidneys are stimulated, and then the yin and yang qi of the 2 kidneys are combined to draw the heart fire of the heart. Finally, the heart fire and kidney water intersect and merge into one, forming a niden. Li Yundong thought, why don't I just try to use the power of heart fire and kidney water to drive my zhenqi? At this time, his internal organs had been cultivated to an extremely powerful level. Not only could he control the beating of his heart, but he could also control the changes of his 6 internal organs at will. He urged the gallbladder in his body to secrete a large amount of qi of courage. The qi of courage was blue, and his face also turned blue. Then, Li Yundong felt that the qi of his 2 kidneys was stimulated by the qi of courage and became restless, slowly swimming out of his 2 kidneys. The 5 viscera and 6 bowels of the human body were all connected together. If one of them moved, the other would follow suit. This was easier said than done, but it was harder than ascending to the heavens. It was impossible to do without great willpower and wisdom. Before, Li Yundong had been entangled with worldly affairs and his heart had been restless. Naturally, he couldn't cultivate to this step. However, at this time, he was provoked by Zi Yuan and immediately calmed down. He easily reached this step. Li Yundong only felt that there was a light qi slowly rising in his chest. When it rose to the position of his heart in the middle dantian, it slowly became hot, like a ball of flame, while another turbid qi slowly sank, like a vast ocean. Li Yundong knew that this was the sign of heaven fire and earth water. Then, the qi of Li Yundong's middle dantian became hotter and hotter. This qi flowed from top to bottom and slowly flowed to the right kidney. Li Yundong knew that the right kidney belonged to yang, while the left kidney belonged to yin. As soon as his right kidney merged with the heaven fire, it immediately turned into a burning flame, as if it was burning the cave of alchemy. Then, Li Yundong tried to guide the blazing qi of his right kidney slowly to his left kidney, doing the combination of yin and yang. At this time, the qi of Li Yundong's right kidney slowly came out, like a huge black turtle slowly poking out its head, crawling towards Li Yundong's left kidney little by little. In sharp contrast to Li Yundong's right kidney, his left kidney was cold, like a big ice house or a big cold pool. As soon as the blazing yang qi was injected into it, the qi suddenly rolled and yin and yang intersected. This was, sometimes the fire burns the elixir cave and goes deep into the cold spring to play with the red turtle. Then, the yin and yang qi of Li Yundong's two kidneys merged into one and rushed straight to the heart of his middle dantian. Suddenly, the earth water and the heaven fire merged into one. Water and fire intersected, and heaven and earth were in harmony. Li Yundong felt as if an atomic bomb had exploded in his body. As soon as the qi of his heart and kidney intersected, it caused a violent nuclear fission. His spirit space exploded in an instant, and Li Yundong suddenly found that the appearance of his god in his spirit space had changed again. In the past, although he had 3 heads and 6 arms, his appearance and skin were still fair. If not for the abnormality of 3 heads and 6 arms, he could still be regarded as a normal person. But now, his skin was really as dark as iron, and his nostrils were constantly spewing out 2 different colors of air. The air coming out of his left nostril was a thick black air, which was the qi of his kidney, and the air coming out of his right nostril was a bright red air, which was the qi of his heart. These 2 qis were condensed and did not dissipate. They lingered around his god, like a red and black cassock draped over his body, or like 2 auspicious clouds holding his dharmakaya. Li Yundong was overjoyed. He knew that the final performance of the 8th turn of the heavenly Jindan technique was to spit out red and black qi from his nose. He had already cultivated to the highest realm of the 8th turn of the fire creation technique. Li Yundong's heart skipped a beat. He mobilized the zhenqi that was born from the qi of courage, and then soaked his niden in the kidney water. Then, he mobilized the zhenqi to draw out his yin spirit. At this time, Li Yundong only felt that his body was light, and then a person jumped out of his body. At a glance, he saw his body sitting cross-legged on the bed, while he was standing on the ground. Li Yundong found that at this time, not only had his body not grown bigger, but it had become smaller. Especially his arms, which were so small that they were like those of a newborn baby. Li Yundong was stunned. He tried to use this hand to pick up something, and as expected, he easily picked it up. Li Yundong couldn't help laughing. He knew that he had finally cultivated to the Yuanying phase and refined his own yang spirit. Once a cultivator cultivated the yang spirit, he would be free from the 5 wheels of life and death, no longer be bound by the shackles of birth, old age, illness, and death, and could be called a zhenren. Before Li Yundong could stop after his success, he suddenly heard a soft knock on the door. Li Yundong's heart skipped a beat. Relying on his small Yuanying body, he found a place to hide. He thought to himself, it's either Su Chan or Zhou Qin. I'll scare them. Li Yundong was secretly proud of himself, but he didn't expect that after the person pushed the door open, he would be stunned when he took a closer look. He saw that the person at the door was holding a plate with a soup bowl on it. She had a graceful figure, a romantic aura, and a beautiful appearance. It was Xueqi, who had a high prestige in the Fox Zen school. Li Yundong asked curiously, "What is she doing here? Didn't I tell them not to disturb me? It's possible that Su Chan and Zhou Qin came to disturb me because of my love. But I don't think they will disturb my cultivation." While he was hesitating, he saw Chao Yi's eyes flickering at the door. She hesitated for a moment, as if she was hesitating whether to enter the door or not. But when her eyes narrowed and she made up her mind to enter, Su Chan suddenly asked curiously behind her, "Sixth Sherbua, what are you doing? Didn't Yundong say that no one should disturb him?" Chao Yi was shocked and came to her senses. She turned around and said to Su Chan with a smile, "Oh, it's Chaner. I made some soup for leader and was wondering if I should bring it in for him." Su Chan rolled her eyes and said with a smile, "Sixth Sherbua, let me do it." Chao Yi smiled and said, "Okay." As she said this, she put the plate in Su Chan's hand. Without looking at Su Chan and Li Yundong, she hurried away. Along the way, she walked in a hurry and bumped into someone at the corner of the stairs. The 2 of them screamed at the same time. Chao Yi took a closer look and saw that the person she had bumped into was Zhuang Yiting. Zhuang Yiting rubbed her forehead and complained, "Shimmy, are you in a hurry to be reincarnated?" Chao Yi smiled awkwardly, apologized, and then left in a hurry. Su Chan, who was on the stairs, looked at the 2 of them and thought to herself, "It's strange. With the skills of the 2 Sherbas, there's no reason for them to bump into each other. Why are they acting so strange today?" The little girl was simple-minded and didn't think too much about it. She smiled and entered the door with the plate. Because she saw that Li Yundong was controlling his qi, she walked quietly, as if she were a thief. When she put the soup plate down, she squatted by the bed, holding her head in her hands, and looked at Li Yundong fixedly, her eyes full of love and infatuation. Li Yundong hid in the corner and saw the little girl looking at his body in a daze, not saying a word. It was as if she would accompany him like this no matter how long he sat like this. His heart warmed and he wanted to tease her, so he quietly came behind her and coughed. This cough didn't matter, but Su Chan was so scared that all the hair on her body stood on end. Su Chan thought to herself, Yundong is meditating and cultivating qi. Who would be hiding in his room? Su Chan didn't say a word. Instead, she turned her hand around and slapped him viciously. Chapter 354. Go to watch net. Su Chan's slap startled him. He hadn't expected that Su Chan would slap him. Watch net. 7K. Oath M. Su Chan had always been known for her speed. Her palm was as fast as lightning, but Li Yundong was in the body of a child at the moment. The palm narrowly brushed past his head and dodged Su Chan's attack. Seeing that Su Chan was about to slap him again, Li Yundong immediately jumped to the side and shouted, "Hey, do you want to kill your husband?" Only then did Su Chan turn around. She looked around and saw a naked child standing not far from her. The child was only about 2 years old, and his skin was smooth, glowing faintly. Su Chan couldn't react for a moment. She widened her eyes and asked curiously, "Little brother, who are you?" Li Yundong didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "Silly girl, it's me, your daddy." Only then did Su Chan come to her senses. She looked surprised and said, "Yundong, have you cultivated the yang spirit body?" The little girl jumped up to Li Yundong happily and squatted down to look at him. Then, she curiously stretched out her hand to pinch the arm of Li Yundong's yang god body. She looked back at Li Yundong's real body sitting on the bed and giggled. "It's so strange. There are 2 Li Yundongs. Actually, I'm Li Yundong's younger brother." Li Yundong blinked at Su Chan and said, "I'm Li Yundong's brother." Su Chan giggled and said, Yes, you are a little brother." As she spoke, she stretched out her hand and flicked Li Yundong's lower body. She giggled and said, "It's indeed a little brother." Li Yundong took a deep breath and said angrily, "Be ****, how dare you call me a little brother?" Li Yundong threw himself into Su Chan's arms, scratching and biting. "Okay, I want to eat Big Granny." Su Chan giggled and put her hands in front of her. She said coquettishly, "My grandma is only for Yundong to eat. You're Yundong's little brother, so I won't let you eat it." Li Yundong said angrily, "I'm not a little brother." After that he said, "Look big." As soon as Li Yundong's voice fell, his body suddenly grew larger, from a 2 or 3-year-old child to a 4 or 5-year-old child. Su Chan's eyes widened in shock. How did your young spirit grow so fast? What do you think? I've grown a lot, haven't I? Su Chan's cheeks were flushed, and she covered her burning face with her palms. Her fingers were wide open, revealing a pair of sly and quick-witted eyes. She giggled and said, "It's only a little bigger." Li Yundong was displeased. He secretly mobilized his zhenqi and said, "Increase, increase." In the blink of an eye, Li Yundong's yang spirit body grew a little bigger. At this time, he looked like a 15 or 16-year-old boy. From his face, one could vaguely see his appearance. Li Yundong said proudly, "How is it? It's really big this time, isn't it?" Su Chan giggled. Yes, big. Master, hurry up and put on your clothes." "I'm so embarrassed. You're so shameless." Li Yundong chuckled. With a thought, his naked yang spirit body put on his clothes again in the blink of an eye, looking no different from a normal person. Only then did Su Chan put down her hand that was covering her face. She giggled and said, "That was close. I almost saw it just now." Li Yundong scolded with a smile. "Bah, the gap between your fingers is even bigger than the window. How dare you say that?" Su Chan said angrily, "No, you're talking nonsense." Li Yundong's yang spirit body flickered and flashed into his real body. He woke up from his meditation and said with a smirk, You just said that your grandma is only for Yundong to eat and not for Yundong's little brother, right? Is that also nonsense? Su Chan giggled and fell into Li Yundong's arms, her head going straight into his arms. She had a pure Yin body, and Li Yundong had cultivated the Yang spirit, so his pure Yang Qi was incredibly strong. Naturally, it attracted the supreme Yin Qi in Su Chan's body. When the pure Yang Qi and the supreme Yin Qi in the human body moved, people would be aroused. Su Chan loved Li Yundong very much and was willing to give him anything. At this time, her body suddenly turned into a pool of spring water, and her hands unconsciously reached down to Li Yundong's lower body to cultivate the 5 dragons embracing pillar magic kung fu. Li Yundong saw that Su Chan's eyes were like silk, and the breath coming out of her nose was full of decadence. He knew that the little girl was about to move, so he moved closer to her, bit her ear, and said with a smile, "What's wrong? Aren't you afraid of being taken by me today?" When people's desires were intertwined, it was often easy to lose their minds. Su Chan looked up at Li Yundong, her eyes blurred with love, as if she wanted to rub herself into Li Yundong's body and never be separated again. She said in a sweet voice, "I've refused you many times. I feel sorry for always rejecting my master." Li Yundong chuckled. He gently raised the little girl's chin with his hand and said with a smile, "You're afraid that I won't be able to control myself after seeing so many beautiful women around me, aren't you?" Su Chan blushed and buried her head in Li Yundong's arms, like a little girl whose thoughts had been seen through. She looked up at Li Yundong stealthily, then lowered her eyes in panic. Her long eyelashes kept trembling. Su Chan murmured, Did I make it so obvious?" Seeing her like this, Li Yundong loved her to the extreme. He laughed and held her in his arms, then lowered his head to kiss the little girl's lips. Su Chan closed her eyes, looking as if she was at his mercy. Her charming appearance would make even a saint burn with fire and lose control. However, Li Yundong just kissed her lips, gently scratched her nose, and said with a smile, "Don't think about it, silly girl. If you give me your virginity now, you will never be able to cultivate to the 6-tailed fox spirit realm in this life." Su Chan's pretty face turned red, and she murmured, I'm just afraid that you'll feel uncomfortable." Li Yundong lovingly held her in his arms and gently rubbed his forehead against the tip of Su Chan's nose. He said, "You're afraid that I'll feel uncomfortable, so you'd rather give up your cultivation. Am I so selfish that I'll ruin your lifelong cultivation for my momentary pleasure?" When Su Chan heard this, she immediately raised her head. Her eyes were wide open and filled with tears. The little girl's heart was in a mess. She only felt that there was such a man in this world who loved her, spoiled her, and cared for her. No matter what happened, he would always think of her. She really hadn't lived in vain once in this life. Su Chan's tears fell, and for a moment, she cried like a pear blossom in the rain. Seeing that she was crying, Li Yundong quickly wiped her tears with both hands. "Oh, why are you crying? Alas, are women really made of water? I didn't make you unhappy, did I? Hey, I just don't want to do that with you, right? Why are you crying like this? Hey, no, you're not crying with joy because you know that you don't have to do that with me, are you?" Su Chan burst into laughter. She gently punched Li Yundong with her fist, wiped away her tears, and said, "No, I remember the 2 golden snakes who died last time." As she spoke, she raised her head with tears in her eyes and said, "I remembered what the golden snake said before it died last time. I felt very emotional and couldn't help crying for a while." Li Yundong smiled and said, "Silly girl, what's there to cry about?" Su Chan shook her head and choked with sobs. At that time, the golden snake said, "I hope I won't be a demon in my next life." When I heard that, I thought to myself, how good would it be if I were a pure human being? Sister Zi Yuan and Sister Xueqi are all pure human beings. No matter where they go, they won't cause any criticism. However, I am a fox demon. Wherever I go, people will say that I have abandoned myself and become a lowly person. But not only did you not despise me, but you also thought about me. I feel so happy. I don't know what kind of blessing I had in my last life to be able to be with you." Li Yundong's eyes became softer and softer. He put his arms around the girl's waist and said softly, "Silly girl, do we still need to say these things between us? I like you not because you are a fox demon or a pure human, but because of your kindness, because of your beauty, because of your innocence, because of your unwavering love, because of your unwavering loyalty to me from the very beginning. Don't think too much about it. Didn't I say last time that if we love each other for a long time, we won't have to make a bed? There will be a long time in the future. Are you afraid that you won't have time to have fun with me? At first, Su-chan's eyes became more and more charming as she listened. Especially at the end, she burst into laughter. It was really like 100 flowers blooming at the same time, and it was amazing. Li Yundong patted the girl's head with a smile and said, "If you really want to have fun with me, hurry up and cultivate. When you reach my level, we can do it." Su-chan giggled. She suddenly seemed to think of something, and a pair of clever eyes rolled around in her eye sockets. As soon as Li Yundong saw her like this, he laughed and said, "What did you think of? Tell me quickly." Su-chan looked at Li Yundong shyly and timidly and said softly, "In fact, we have a way to cultivate faster." Hearing this, Li Yundong smiled and said, "What way?" Su-chan said shyly, "There are actually only 3 ways for us demons to cultivate. One is to absorb the ling-chi of heaven and earth when the moon is full, in order to refine the Niden and then transform into a human form." Li Yundong smiled and said, "Is it easy to seduce men in human form?" Su-chan said angrily, "You're so annoying. Man is the spirit of all living things. Among all living things, only human beings can cultivate directly. If other living things want to cultivate, they must first transform into a human body before they can cultivate." Hearing this, Li Yundong also sighed and said, "Yes, I really understand this sentence today. Today I cultivated the heavenly Jindan technique to the 8th phase, and suddenly, the Yin spirit became the Yang spirit. My cultivation has improved a lot. In fact, I just led the kidney chi to my heart in the heart fire, and then led the kidney chi on the right side to the left side. But many demons and stone monsters don't even have internal organs. How can they cultivate?" Su-chan also sighed faintly and said, "Yes, in the way of cultivation, it can be said that men can get twice the result with half the effort, while women can get half the result with twice the effort. However, we female demons have to spend 100 times the effort to cultivate. Because of this, some female demons can't bear the hardships and loneliness of cultivation, so they came up with a way to seize the essence of Yang to strengthen their own Yuan-yin. This kind of cultivation method is extremely fast, but it's easy to cause public anger and divine punishment at the expense of others." Li Yundong chuckled and said, "There are good and bad people, and there are naturally good and evil demons. We can't generalize them. But the cultivation method you just mentioned, is it to seize the essence of Yang? Aren't you afraid that I will take you instead?" Su-chan shook her head with a blushing face and said, No, it's not what you think. I used Yin Qi to explore your body and take out a little Yang Qi for my own use. This way, I won't hurt your foundation." When I first met you, I was injured by Wan Hongling and Sister Zi Yuan. At that time, I saw you sleeping next to me, and you were a virgin, so I secretly took out a little of your Yuan-inge. Su-chan looked at Li Yundong timidly and said, "I haven't told you about this. You won't blame me, will you?" Li Yundong laughed and said, "Well, you secretly took me once." After that, Li Yundong fell on the bed on his back and shouted, "Hero, come and pick me up." Su-chan giggled and said with a smile, "You're so annoying. It's not what you think." Li Yundong smiled wickedly and said, "Then what is it?" Su-chan pointed at her red lips and said with a smile, "It's sucking with my mouth." Li Yundong looked enlightened and exclaimed, "It turns out that you use your cherry mouth to suck." Ah! Su-chan didn't understand. She nodded and said, "Yes, the mouth is one of the 7 apertures. It can not only release qi but also inhale, so." As she spoke, she saw that Li Yundong had already fallen on the bed laughing. Su-chan was stunned, but she quickly reacted. Her pretty face turned red, as if blood was about to drip out. She rushed over with shame and anger and shouted, "Bad guy, what are you thinking about?" Li Yundong laughed and hugged the little girl on the bed. Well, I might have something to do next week, so I'll bring up next week's explosion to this week. Judging from the current situation, the 7th on the flower list should be able to sit still. For the time being, I'll still do it every day from midnight to Monday. I'm sorry for the trouble I've caused my readers. You're tuning in to the Xueqi's Martial Arts Saga YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.